Hello, everyone, and welcome to Scary Stories for Sleep Part 1, the new series that you'll be seeing coming out periodically on the ToxTells channel. And don't worry, I won't be doing an intro like this for each one of the videos in the series. I'm just doing it for this first one so I can explain exactly what it is. This series is going to be compilation videos of all the disturbing real Reddit stories and r/NoSleep Stories all in one video. And they're more geared towards listeners who like to put on scary story narration channels to fall asleep to. And many people do that, including myself, for a long time as well. Not as of late, though, unfortunately for me, because of my current work schedule. I will involuntarily pass out as soon as I get home from work, even if I have stuff I want to get done before I fall asleep. It just doesn't matter. But that's enough rambling from me, guys. Hopefully you enjoy these Scary Story for Sleep videos, and they'll be coming out periodically as the channel goes on. Thanks. Enjoy. I would like to talk about this experience since I haven't told many people in hopes I can get better. I genuinely believe I have some sort of PTSD due to this event. My friend group and I really like exploring and doing urbex. We have gone on camping trips, long hikes, and challenges where we have to follow a straight line. We enjoyed a lot of what the world had to offer, but we wanted to eventually go to buildings that were worn down and looked abandoned to experience something different. First, we started off going to worn-down farmer sheds out in the middle of fields, then to places that were open during certain parts of the year, and we eventually found our first big adventure. It was an old paper mill that was being partially restored, but around 85% was still untouched, and was not being visited by any workers. We had run-ins with homeless there, but it was all still a fun experience, due to the large expanse of the structure. Eventually we explored every nook and cranny, so we started looking for other places to explore, until we found what looked to be a car scrapyard/factory. It had a central courtyard that held cars that were in various states of disarray. As we looked around, we started noticing how put together some items were, and there was a newly parked truck in the courtyard due to the absence of dust. This should have been our sign. We kept looking around until we found a strangely furnished portion of the building where it had actual walls and wood veneer coating every surface. It seemed very out of place as the building surrounding it was very run down and was largely exposed to the elements. In this portion of the building there were 3 doors and a short hallway connecting them, and there were dusty boots sitting in the hallway similar to the entrance of the house. Of the 3 doors, one had a peephole, and one had a large frosted pane in it. We attempted to open the doors, and one opened, and it was the plain door, and it seemed to be a storage room for old chairs. The others we could not open. We then explored more and eventually left. Around a month later, we revisited with a small group of me and 2 others. We spent around an hour exploring and moving around until we happened across the same strange doors. We decided to try opening them again, and this time the frosted glass door opened and we walked in. It smelled like someone who wore strong cologne was in this room. We were talking in this room until we heard a loud bang come through the wall in the room with the peephole. We all proceeded to freeze in the doorway until the peephole door swung open. As far as we know, there are 2 ways to exit from here, and both ways were in view of whoever opened that door. One was a flight of stairs, and the other was a relatively long hallway. One of the people who we went with was in front of the door when it opened, and he was closest to the stairs. When that door opened, I heard a very loud thud, a click, and no noise after. Me and the other person decided to hide in the room we just opened and stood just to the left of the door. I watched as an old man holding a handgun peek into the door and stared directly at me. I stared and said no words as I shook my head to plead for my life. He then closed the door instead and went back to his room. Seeing this opportunity, we decided to escape, and somehow the room we were in had a second door in the back, which we used. But we were not clear yet, as this main room was open and had a central walkway, making it impossible to visually sneak away. As we were making it for an exit, we saw the old man come out of the hallway with a shotgun. Thanks to the old construction, steps were unpredictable and we made a lot of noise while still in sight, but he went the opposite way from us for some reason. As we eventually escaped the building, I had assumed the other person had died or been knocked out when they fell down the stairs, as there was no noise to be heard. We eventually made our way to the parking lot when we had discovered he had also thankfully made it out. We should have kept moving because we heard a bullet pass nearby and a gunshot. It was a smaller caliber, probably a .22 long rifle, but we ran and drove away. This building was also in a city, so when we were at the parking lot, we were on a completely different property. I assumed he was just scaring us, but I genuinely thought someone died and I was going to too. When recounting the story, especially now when it was over a year ago, it makes my heart race and I get tunnel vision. Ever since, I have never done urbex. I've never told anyone this story in real life. Not my parents, not my friends. It's been 3 years and I still don't know if the man in the field was just watching us, or waiting for something worse to happen. This happened about 3 years ago, and at the time, I didn't know who to tell or to talk to because I was in complete shock. So the 2 friends I was with that night and I decided to keep it to ourselves. I had 2 friends. Let's call them Zach and Jake. One random day we were bored, so we decided to host a party at Zach's house over the weekend. He had a big house, a huge backyard, and a pool, so it was perfect. It was also the weekend right before spring break. His parents were out of town, which made it even better. When the day of the party arrived, we met up hours earlier to set everything up. Later that night, around 80 people showed up, and even more came after. That's when the drinking started. Around 1:30 a.m., people began heading home, but me, Zach, and Jake still had a lot of energy left. I should mention that Zach's house was the last one in his neighborhood. Behind his backyard was a massive cornfield, stretching about a mile long. I don't remember the exact distance. There were no houses behind it, just fields. Zach also had a gate in the backyard that led directly into the cornfield. Zach owned a Can-Am. It had 2 seats, but someone could stand on the back. Around 2 a.m., the 3 of us had the bright idea to take it into the field while blasting music. I was driving. Zach was in the passenger seat, and Jake was standing on the back. We cruised around the field for about 30 minutes before getting bored and deciding to head back. But we decided to take one last turn. Halfway through the field, a man suddenly appeared. He looked around 60 years old with gray hair, wearing a vest, and holding a hunting rifle with a scope. It was hard to see him clearly because it was pitch black. The only light came from the Can-Am's headlights. We passed him without stopping. About 500 feet later, the Can-Am suddenly shut off by itself. Even though the keys were still in the ignition, my heart dropped. We were still close enough that he could see or hear us, but when we looked back, he was gone. After a few seconds, which felt like minutes, the Can-Am finally turned back on. We didn't say a word. We just drove straight back toward the house without looking back. Before going inside, we stopped to catch our breath and process what had just happened. That's when we heard a loud bang, and something metal hit the Can-Am. We froze. A second later, we heard another shot ring out, and something whizzed past us. That was enough. We jumped back on the Can-Am and sped home. We drove through the backyard, parked it, ran inside the house, and locked every door and window we could. We turned off every light inside and outside the house. Zach had security cameras, so we went into the room with the monitors showing the backyard and the front of the house. That's when things got even worse. A car slowly drove through the backyard area and stopped. Its headlights stayed on. It just sat there idling for about 15 minutes. We didn't recognize the car, and no one got out. We stayed completely silent, watching the monitors, afraid to even move. Eventually, the car drove away. We didn't sleep that night. What scared us the most was trying to understand why an elderly man would be standing in the middle of a cornfield at 2:30 in the morning, and how a car could have been so close to the house shortly after. The next morning, we checked Google Maps to see where the man could have come from. There were no houses, no shelters, nothing anywhere near the field. That meant he was either staying out there or had been watching us the entire time during the party. We never told our parents or anyone else. 3 years have passed since then, and the 3 of us have gone our separate ways and don't talk much anymore. But it's a night I'll never forget, and one I still think about every time I hear something outside late at night. While I am going to give you all a very shortened version of what I call the craziest and terrifying days of my life, I want to make it clear that it all really happened. Everything I'm about to describe took place within the span of 1 year, while living in what we called the White House, the home we rented in 2016 to 2017. It was me, my boyfriend, and my 5 children. We had just gone through a very hard time. I had recently had a stillborn baby, and on top of that loss, I became extremely sick afterward. I had such bad vertigo that the world spun constantly. I couldn't function. I was in and out of the hospital, and honestly, we were barely staying afloat. Eventually, I recovered enough, and we decided to move into this new place, the White House. It was big, had a nice yard, the kids loved it. At first, everything seemed normal. But looking back now, the very first signs that something was wrong were the sounds coming from the vents. They weren't normal house noises. Hard to explain, but they sounded wrong, almost like something was alive in there. At first, I ignored it, but then things started happening. When I would go downstairs to the basement to do laundry, I began feeling like someone was watching me from the other room. I'd hear little noises like someone was trying to get my attention. When I looked around, nothing. But then came the dreams. Dreams of a little girl hiding in that basement room. Then the emotional waves started. I would suddenly feel sad, scared, and unwanted in the house. It's also when the handprints began appearing on my legs and arms. And I know how it sounds, but it felt exactly like invisible hands were grabbing me, pinching, squeezing my legs, hurting me. I kept this all to myself, but inside, I was starting to panic. One day, my youngest son, 2 years old at the time, came downstairs with me. He reached the bottom, turned toward that same room, waved, and said, "Hi." Then he looked back at me and said, "Mommy, come say hi. Come say hi, Mommy." I froze. I grabbed him and ran upstairs, shut the door, and told my boyfriend. I knew it. I knew something was down there. That's when I finally told him everything, and he admitted he also felt weird things. He didn't know how to explain them. Around this time, I worked nights as a bartender, so I was gone a lot. Turns out my kids had been experiencing their own things and hadn't said anything either. My 6-year-old said he didn't like looking into the kitchen at night because he saw the lady. My daughter slept with her doors closed so they didn't have to see the same woman. They described more: a little girl in the basement, her family, a mother, father, daughter, and 1 or 2 brothers. The little girl had long black hair, old-fashioned clothes, black boots, and she was burnt, covered in ash, hair burnt, skin burnt. My kids said the mother and daughter were kind, but the father and brothers were mean. Things escalated after that. One night someone was showering upstairs and suddenly water started pouring out of the kitchen light fixture, like pouring. You'd think the electricity would blow, but no, it was like nothing happened. Then the entire basement flooded with toilet water. The landlord said someone stuffed a t-shirt in the toilet, but none of us did that. While cleaning the mess, I noticed a room in the basement, what we called the red room. The entire room was burnt, charred black, wood turned to ash, but then I asked the landlord about it, and he insisted there were no fires. No, that house has never had a fire. Then she said neighbors complained about traffic coming in and out of the house all night long. What traffic? We had none. Things kept getting stranger. One night I was in the bathroom and heard the deepest, loudest bark right outside the window, like a hellhound. It terrified both my boyfriend and me. We tried to listen again. Nothing. He opened the window and yelled. Still nothing. No dog ever barked in reaction. It made no sense. Did we really just hear hellhounds? Then came the voice. Deep, angry, right in my ear. "Get the fuck out of my house!" We ran outside to smoke and calm down, but as soon as we turned to go back inside, the bark came again. So loud, so close, right behind us. We slammed the door shut. My kids weren't aware of most of this, but I was falling apart inside, terrified constantly. I tried researching the house but found nothing. My kids found rocks under the deck with names carved into them. They believed those were the dead family. I didn't know what to think. And then came the night in the bathtub. I ran a bath, left the door cracked. While relaxing, I suddenly felt watched. The door moved. The doorknob turned. Voices, faint and mumbling, like men talking outside the door. I panicked, wrapped the drain chain around my toe so I wouldn't drown if someone tried to push me under. When I finally opened the door, nobody was awake. Nothing was there. My boyfriend's parents gave him a blessed pendant from their religion, and he hung it above our bedroom door. Things calmed a little. The lady ghost would open curtains every morning. I didn't mind her. But one day I found pennies burned into the basement steps. Old writings on the walls near the back door, and a high shelf were old cups, Jewish cups, in a Jewish mezuzah-type shrine that's meant to keep evil out. I had accidentally taken it down without knowing. That scared me even more. Then I noticed we were getting mail for 10 to 12 different previous tenants. The landlord had once said people moved in and out constantly, leaving everything behind. That suddenly made sense. Then came the vent incident. My bedroom mirror usually sat over the vent because I hated looking at it. For some reason that night, the mirror had been moved slightly. While sitting on my bed coloring, I kept getting the feeling to look over there. When I finally did, I saw long fingers, a pale arm, something behind the vent with long hair, dark eyes, and the fingers grabbed my mirror and slid it back over the vent. Fast, real. I froze, I cried, I called my boyfriend, then my sister. My phone wouldn't work, no service, just strange beeping noises. My boyfriend raced home. I stayed on my bed holding this machete until he arrived. I couldn't forget what I saw, no matter how hard I tried. After that, a friend who had been in our basement before told my boyfriend he would never go down there again because something isn't right in that house. He said it felt just like the haunting in his own home involving a little girl. We had told him nothing before that. More things that happened. The neighbor's quiet dog barked at our house all night but never barked in front of its own owner. People in the neighborhood stared at me like I was evil. Even the cops acted strangely towards me. I never did anything to anyone. I didn't understand it. One night my friend came over. As we sat coloring, I suddenly felt like she hated me, like she wanted to kill me. The energy was suffocating. I kept glancing at her. She looked normal, but at one point she turned her head, eyes black, and smiled the most evil smile I've ever seen. I looked away, blinked, looked again. She was just coloring. Later, she said she had felt extremely uncomfortable all night and felt like I was mad at her. Whatever was in the house played with both of us. That same night, after we left briefly, her husband saw a woman walk across our hallway. He ran out of the house and never set foot inside again. More events followed. Someone jiggled keys outside. Someone opened our fence and garage in the middle of the night. Hi was written on our car windshield. The lights worked only when they wanted to. My house got mysteriously clean from top to bottom when nobody was there to do it, and it smelled like perfumes I had never owned. Even my boyfriend heard footsteps running towards him in the basement. A friend once knocked on the door and said a woman opened it and told him to come in. Nobody was living near the door at the time. Then came the final night. I was alone with the kids. Everyone was asleep. I was drifting off when the entire house shook violently as a bomb exploded. Then I heard something cutting my window screens. The windows started to rise. I grabbed both curtains and held them tight so nothing could reach inside. A deep male voice said, "I am entering this house because it's mine, and you will get the fuck out." When he screamed out, the whole house shook again. I held those curtains until I passed out. My boyfriend came home to find me clutching them in my sleep. The next morning, the screens were indeed cut. I was done. We moved out shortly after. When the electricity got shut off during the move, nothing paranormal happened again. I truly believe that they needed that energy to manifest. Even today, the house still stands. It sold recently for only $56,000, way below what it was worth. I can't help but wonder if the energy in that house is the reason. I still feel drawn to it, like it calls my name, but I don't know if that's good or dangerous. I wish I knew who the ghosts were and what really happened there. I wish investigators would go there someday, because something is haunting that house, and what my family and I lived through left scars we still carry. When I was 10 years old, I had this experience. One night I woke up and needed to go to the bathroom. When I went back to bed, I left the door open. We had a bathroom, it led directly to the kitchen, and the door led to the kitchen. I came back when I was already falling asleep. I looked into the kitchen and there was a green figure in the house. It had deformed hands. It was indescribable. It stopped there quickly, after about 2 seconds, but I can't even really describe it. Then I hid under the covers and my thoughts were, what is it? Can it abduct us? Is it bad? Is it an alien? But then I somehow fell asleep. I don't know how. I woke up in the morning, normal, and the figure was gone. The interesting thing is that I still remember it to this day. I don't know if it was stress, something supernatural, or something else. So this was when I was around 10 or 11 years old. We had rented a new house. This house had a basement with bedrooms, a bathroom, and a door that led outside in one of the rooms. This will be important for later. Our new house was pretty nice, except the old owners took an axe to the wall, punched through the drywall, and all that stuff. We patched it up, don't worry. But they also left alcohol, cards, paper, and some other stuff in the oven. I think they were trying to make it so we might burn the house down. Anyway, now that we know that they were kinda crazy, this is where the basement door comes into the story. The basement door didn't have a lock on it, and it had a broken window we didn't get around to fixing at the time, because we were busy. One day, a week or two after renting it, we went downstairs into the basement and found the door slightly opened and a knife on the floor by the door. We still live in this house, and since it had ghosts and mimics, those are for another story though, we didn't know if someone had placed it there to threaten us or if it was a ghost. We didn't own that knife though. I don't know how old I was. Like, I probably think I was in diapers at this time. But there were two incidents. I called one the brown house incident and the other the blue house incident. I don't remember where the houses were at or anything else. When I was a child, I remember being wrapped up in my Spider-Man blanket. And I remember crying and screaming in the bathroom I was in. I remember this weird tall figure with no face. It looked like it was burnt. And the weird thing was, I remember the skin, like red mixed with orange and yellow, like burns and shit. And I remember it choking me. The other incident that happened when I was a kid was in the blue house, and I remember my uncle telling me in the basement, do not open the bedroom door to this room. He went upstairs and I remember opening it, and this weird shadow figure with horns, slowly walking up to me. I remember slamming my uncle's bedroom door and running back upstairs screaming, there's a monster in your room, to my uncle. I don't know if there were real monsters, demons, or something, or if I was imagining shit, but all I remember was I was a kid, and I was very scared. I was about 5 or 6 years old. This was around 2018 or 2019. My cousin, let's call him, Maverick, and I were playing hide and seek in a brick field near where we lived. Huge stacks of bricks, workers everywhere, dust in the air. I was the seeker. I counted, and Maverick ran off to hide. When I finished, I found him pretty quickly behind a brick wall. He said he was thirsty and told me to wait while he went to get water, so I waited. I didn't realize how much time had passed. Back then I was a dumb, calm kid. Even when something felt wrong, I never took it seriously. After what was probably 2 hours, I got annoyed and decided to look for him myself. I asked the workers if they'd seen him. They all said no. Slowly the place started emptying out. The sun was going down. One by one the workers left. Suddenly the brick field felt huge and quiet. Then I heard growling. At first it was far away, like wolves, somewhere in the distance. Then it sounded closer. My stomach felt tight, but I still didn't cry or run. I just stood there, not fully understanding how bad the situation was. That's when 2 men showed up. They looked completely normal, calm, friendly. They said they'd help me get out. I don't even remember questioning them. I just trusted them. There was a bicycle nearby. I sat on the seat while they walked beside it, guiding me towards the exit. While moving, something made me look down. Their feet weren't touching the ground. No toes, no soles, just legs, floating slightly above the dirt. I panicked inside, but I forced myself to stay calm. I told myself I was just tired, that I hadn't had water, that my brain was making things up. When we reached the exit, I saw my mom running towards me. She looked scared. She hugged me immediately and asked if I was okay, where I'd been, and who helped me get out. I turned around to show her the 2 men. They were gone. Just gone. Later, I found out Maverick had gone home and told everyone nothing. Instead of getting in trouble, he was praised and kissed by his grandmother, while no one really understood that I had been missing for 2 hours. I still don't know what those 2 men were, but I remember one thing clearly. They helped me leave, and their feet never touched the ground. I, an 18-year-old female, am into all of that crystal and tarot type of practices. I used to be way more into it when I was younger, and now that it's been a few years of not being into it, I want to start doing tarot and using my crystals more. One of the very first times I was doing one of those practices was when I was black mirror scrying. For those of you who don't know what that is, it's when you use a black obsidian crystal as a mirror. It's very similar to reading a crystal ball. I was about 13 to 15 when I tried this. I read my spell book on how to do it, setting up a few candles and setting up some crystals too. I even made sure to set up a circle of protection to keep evil entities out. Just typing this out makes me feel like I'm one of those crazy witch girlies. I'm not. Well, to an extent I am. Anyway, once I was ready to look into the black obsidian crystal my mom lent me to use as my black mirror, I got in the zone. I was really excited at first because I really felt like I did things right, and I started to see things. Looking back, I can't remember what I saw, but it was cool. Until I saw this white-faced figure loom over me in the reflection of the mirror. It kind of reminded me of Slender Man. I've never seen the movie though before this. Just typing it out brings me back to the same anxiety I felt then. I'm not sure how long I sat there in shock, but after about 2 to 3 minutes of sitting in shock, I run out. Without opening and shutting my circle of protection, I go tell my parents what I saw. My parents just told me I was okay and they would sage my room. They never did after I told them that, but they have cleansed it since. I don't know what it could be. And I want to try to black mirror scrying again because crystal ball reading just doesn't really work for me. But seeing that thing again is a big no. And all of my friends think it was just my imagination, but I know what I saw and felt. So yeah, just thought I'd get some strangers' perspectives on what this could be, or if it really was just my imagination. This is a long one, so strap on in. Around 5 to 6 months ago, me and some friends got the bright idea of exploring some abandoned places around our town. It is pretty small, so nothing more than a few farmhouses and collapsed barns, but nonetheless, we were committed to it. One day on my way to work, I saw an old gas station I'd never noticed before. It was pretty rotten and worn looking, so I thought it would be perfect to check out. A couple days later, me and my 3 friends set out to check this place out. We went in the evening around 7 o'clock, and we were able to get in through a broken window, leading to some type of basement. We were in there for less than 5 minutes when we could audibly hear loud footsteps upstairs, and it kind of freaked us out. We thought of checking it out, but opted to just go home. Not even a month later, I see a news article about a man rescued from the same gas station. A Apparently 5 dudes had tied him up and were torturing him for multiple days before one of them was seen exiting the same window we came in from. Anyway, I was mortified to learn this and since have never stepped foot in any type of abandoned building. What happened between Colorado and Wyoming? First off, if the story sounds familiar, I have shared it a few times on the web. Not anywhere it would gain any particular popularity, but it is what it is. Second, I am sharing this as an experience, not written fiction. This did happen to me. It still sends chills down my spine to this day. I used to travel for work, doing photography and taking photos of undeveloped parcels of land for real estate investors. It was a fun job, but by no means was it easy. A lot of times I'd have to hike out to parcels because there was no road access, finding any way through unfamiliar terrain with outdated maps at best. And not to mention, dealing with locals which would either be curious or hostile, but I digress. This was my first out-of-state trip on my own, as the other person who was supposed to go with me had gotten into an accident and was bedridden. Knowing the drive just to get to my first destination would be a multi-hour one, between 6 to 7 hours if I recall, I slept all that day in preparation. I wanted to be in Rawlins, Wyoming around sunrise so I could eat, download my offline maps, and start combing over GPS satellite images to find a way onto my first parcel. I settled in and started my drive around 11 p.m., well-rested, well-packed, fully stocked on-road snacks, caffeine, and smokes. Winding through the windy mountain passes, taking in the view under the moonlight, jamming out to my tunes, things were going well for the first 4 or so hours. Then I hit a fog bank, somewhere between Kremling and Walden, Colorado. The fog was incredibly thick, which prompted me to slow way down. I'm glad I did, because around a particularly sharp bend, I got stopped by a huge herd of elk. They were posted up all over the road as far as I could see in the fog, just chillin'. Now my thought process at the time was, I need to get moving before some fool turns that corner and plows into me, or the elk. So I rolled my window down and hollered at them, "Get a job!" And I'm met with that particular silence that only heavy fog or snow brings, only broken by the occasional shuffle from one of the elk, none of which paid me even the slightest of mind. That was until about a minute later. "Get a job!" My voice, unmistakably, coming from the opposite side of the elk herd, the direction I was headed. The elk? They very much so paid attention to that voice. They bolted back past me in a panic, one even slammed into the side mirror of my vehicle. As soon as they were clear, I gunned it. I've never driven so fast before or after in fog. If there was going to be some creepy thing waiting for me in that fog on the road, well, it would meet the front grille of that lifted Grand Cherokee long before it got to me. I drove until I was forced to stop for gas. I believe in Saratoga, Wyoming. I was pretty shaken. Nothing else unsettling happened on that trip, despite staying in the allegedly haunted hotel of Medicine Bow, Wyoming. I was allowed to stay in the historical section, as everything else was booked up. Very kind of the hotel owners, but I am sorry to say I did not have anything spooky happen during my stay there. Perhaps the ghost knew I had enough of a fright already. So that's it. Honestly, the encounter was creepy as heck, and I'm grateful that was as far as it went. I think I was haunted when I was 11. When I was little, I was terrified of sleeping alone. I wasn't used to it, and on a very regular occurrence, went home during school trips because I wanted to be with my parents. My family and I went to the doctor to get it checked out, and the diagnosis was, as expected, emotional attachment disorder. While that was a good explanation for many things, it didn't explain the phenomena I had experienced in my room in the past. My mother and I often mentioned that I was terrified of the dark, but only in my room. The symptoms of my condition were very strange at home. I was terrified outside the house at night, not because of the dark, but, as I said, because my parents weren't there. When I was home, it was enough to sleep in a different room because I knew my parents were in the house. It was different when I was in my own room. I constantly felt this uneasy sensation of being watched and imagined all sorts of things. My mind was racing. I could only think about creepy figures, monsters, and ghosts. as if something was planting these thoughts in my head. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't stop them. When I left my room, those thoughts suddenly stopped. Even when I went to another room to sleep, even when it was dark, they weren't there anymore. Once, I went to my parents' room to get some peace and quiet. Suddenly, I heard a loud knock that was clearly coming from my room. But it wasn't like these cheap knocks that you can hear in those weird ghost encounter YouTube videos. It was a knock, almost like someone was violently smashing against the door. My parents used to tell me that I was just being silly, but now as an adult, I clearly know what I heard. I no longer have these problems. I started praying and often deliberately exposed myself to the dark to overcome my fear. However, I almost never slept in my room. To this day, I don't know what was going on in my room, but I do know that it wasn't just my mind playing tricks on me. What do you think? I thought my brother kept whispering my name while I tried to nap. Turns out he never did. So last year I get back from the store thinking the house is going to be empty, right? Drop the bags, whatever. Then I see my brother's home anyway. Cool, no big deal. I was pretty beat though, so I just flop on the living room couch for a quick nap. You know, the lazy kind where you don't even bother going upstairs? I'm half out, super relaxed, when out of nowhere I hear this soft whisper right next to me. I snap awake, look around. Nothing. Room's empty. Sun's coming in, dead quiet. I'm like, okay, brain being weird. Close my eyes again. Couple minutes later, Sam. Again, a little clearer, still super quiet, like someone's literally breathing in my ear. I'm annoyed now, but still try to ignore it. Then the third time, Sam. Even softer, kinda drawn out. That one got me. I sit straight up, heart pounding a bit, and yell down the hall, yo, what? I march over to the bathroom, doors shut. Shower's going full blast. I knock hard. Dude, stop messing with me. Brother yells back through the water, all confused. What the hell? I'm in the shower. What do you want? I just stand there for a second. Did you whisper my name? Like 3 times? Pause. Just the shower running. Nah, man, I didn't say anything. Been in here the whole time. I back away slow, looking back at the couch like it's gonna do something. Whole house felt too quiet after that. Still gives me a little chill thinking about it. Haven't napped there the same way since. Man with chains. At the end of my senior year, there was this spot where all the seniors would go to smoke or drink. Since it was close by and still on school property, security would eventually patrol around the area. One day, a few weeks before school ended, my idiot friend of a friend decided to throw a rock at security patrolling. Eventually, the whole school security was there. We decided to run and head into the woods and got separated into 3 groups. Hours passed, and finally my friends and I were reunited. When we came to, my friends looked pretty spooked, and I had asked what was wrong. They claimed to have seen a man who was almost 7 feet tall and chains wrapped around his arms while lost in the woods. They explained that they couldn't see anything since nightfall was coming in. All they can see is a huge silhouette. He did speak to them, asking, "What the fuck are you doing here?" And he began to chase them. So school ended, never went back to the spot. Until this day, we had no idea who he was or what he was doing in the middle of the woods with chains. I was stalked by a skinwalker. I've been thinking about this for years. Me and my family have never came up with an explanation for it or how it could possibly be debunked. From what I can remember, I was around 8 at the time this happened, so it could have been a part of my imagination, but I highly doubt that. The story starts when me and my family had planned to stay at my grandparents' over the Christmas holidays like we have done for years. My grandparents live in a very isolated area. They are mostly surrounded by empty fields of land my grandfather owns or other farmers near the area. Because of this, there weren't any parks or other kids me and my siblings could play with, and we didn't have much to entertain ourselves other than play hide and seek in the extremely overgrown grass or sit on my grandfather's tractor. One evening, after we had finished dinner, we asked our grandma if we could go back outside, which she said was fine, and we must not go too deep into the fields, and if we did, to just wait until she found us. So like usual, me and my siblings were playing hide and seek before I realized I could no longer hear their footsteps and I had gone too deep. I no longer knew where I was, but I could merely make out I was around 2 entire fields away from my siblings and that my grandparents' house was on my far left, but I still stayed in place because I was scared of accidentally going deeper into the fields and getting into bigger trouble. Eventually, I heard another pair of footsteps. They were fast and coming from my right before I heard what sounded like my older sister call out my name. It sounded close by, but even through the thin grass, I couldn't see her. Obviously, being a child, I followed my sister's voice, despite it being on the opposite direction of my grandparents' house. I followed the voice for what I could remember was close to 20 minutes. Each time her voice felt further and further away. Suddenly, while I was walking, I recognized a certain tree in the distance. It was then that I knew I was on another farmer's plot of land that I was forbidden to go into. Whatever I was following was not my sister. My sister was a stern follower of my grandparents' rules and would never dare to go out of my grandfather's land onto another farmer's. Never in my life have I felt such a horrible feeling in my stomach. I bolted back into the direction I came. I could still hear rustling behind me. It was terrifying. I could hear that thing call out my name, but it sounded more and more sinister, like grunts and gurgles in between every breath. A nearby elderly couple found me after I was curled up on the floor, hiding beneath the grass. They took me inside and had called my parents to tell them they had found me. It turns out all of my other siblings, including my older sister, had gone back inside apart from my little brother after the first 10 minutes of being outside, and they had assumed I was still playing. What felt like 30 minutes was actually 3 entire hours. I had walked 8.5 miles. My parents were close to filing a report before I was found. Since that day, I never went back into the fields, and still, when I visit, I keep far away from them. I'll never forget the way he looked at me. This happened back in 2012. It was my second semester of college, and this was just one of those days I just really didn't want to go to class, but still wanted to be productive. So instead, I skipped class that day to go to the Barnes & Noble at my local town center. Well, the town center was always busy with all kinds of shoppers. It was a weekday, so a little less busier than we'd see on a weekend. I was looking forward to a quiet morning sitting in the B&N Starbucks cafe with a cozy peppermint mocha and bacon Gouda sandwich whilst working on an art project on my laptop that was due for class. I couldn't find parking outside of the bookstore, nor by the shops nearby, so I had to park my car in the lot that's behind all the shops. It's a big lot with about 5 rows of cars, so I managed to find a spot. I grabbed my laptop bag, lock up the car, and head to B&N, go to the cafe to get my order, and then find a spot to sit after I get my drink and breakfast. The first hour went by completely undisturbed. Then a guy sits at the table across from me. I'm always hyper aware of my surroundings, so without looking, I could tell this person wasn't sitting with a book or with food or a drink, and he didn't pull out a laptop or even pull out his phone. He just sat there. I never looked directly at him, only using my peripheral vision to notice these details. Even so, I ignored him at first, deciding maybe he's waiting for someone or even waiting on an order, so I continued my work. Well, this guy still didn't move and no one joined him. No order came. He didn't start reading a book, or his phone, or messing with a laptop. He just sat there at the table across from me with his hands on the table. I get the sneaking suspicion that I'm being watched. You know that creeping feeling you get that crawls up your spine? I felt like it had to be him, because he's facing me. But why would he be looking at me? I don't want to look up and make eye contact with him, or give him any idea that I want to engage with him, but I still want to make sure he is the one who's looking at me. So rather than look up towards him, I look past his shoulder, towards the front doors of the shop, once again, using my peripheral vision to see him more clearly. And he's not just looking at me, he's staring at me. This isn't a normal stare either. There was nothing casual about it. It looked hyper-focused and intent, but a bit glassy. The kind of look that your cat might have when looking at a bird or squirrel outside. Predatory. Alarms went off in my head, but I tried to ignore him and went back to what I was doing. This guy continues to just stare at me. He never says anything. He never tries to get my attention or ask for it. He just stares at me. My palms were starting to sweat, and I just couldn't concentrate on my work anymore. I wanted to get out of there, get as far away as possible from him. But I know I can't just get up and walk out the door, into a fairly remote parking lot where he could hide behind cars. I needed to ditch this guy. I needed to break away from his field of vision. I also needed to assess just how much in danger I really was, so I shut down my laptop and slid it into my backpack. The guy continues not to move across from me. Zip up my backpack and pull it onto my shoulder as I get up casual as possible and head for the restrooms, but I don't go into the restrooms. Turn in the book aisle beside the restrooms at the last minute and duck and weave behind a few others. I look behind me and I spot the guy at the end of the aisle, and when he saw me look back, he staggered and quickly ducked behind another aisle. That's how I knew for sure I was being stalked. Now, in hindsight, it might have been safer for me to loudly call him out and drag everyone's attention to him in the store. Looking back, maybe it's what I should have done, but I was young and I was scared and really just wanted to get the hell away from this guy. Besides, if he left, how am I to know he wouldn't be waiting for me somewhere outside? So I spent a few minutes moving through the aisles of the store, sometimes very quickly just to make sure I lost him. Then I left the store with my keys in my palm, with them sticking out between my fingers, just in case I end up needing to defend myself, and moved quickly to my car in the parking lot. As soon as I was in my car, I locked the doors and pulled out before heading straight home. I was just so relieved that I escaped this guy. I'll never forget the way his eyes looked though. There was just something primal and inhuman about it. I've never seen anyone look like that, and I hope I never do again. Oh, just a little bonus. When I told my boyfriend at the time about the whole thing, he told me, "That's what you get for going anywhere by yourself without me. Why didn't you even tell me you were going to the bookstore today?" But this boyfriend, now ex, also made a fuss about me wearing certain clothes around his friends and has major jealousy and control issues, so not a shock to me currently. But at the time, I was shocked he wasn't just relieved I was okay, and just told me it was my fault for being stupid. Exes are exes for a reason though. It took years before I felt enough confidence to go anywhere by myself again. Up until age 30, I only ever went out with a significant other, friends, or family, but I do go out by myself on occasion. Sometimes you just want to do something nobody else you know is interested in, and you can't let fear of what might happen stop you. Even so, I never leave the house without some form of self-defense on me, and I always try to park close or in a populated area when I go out alone. Stay vigilant. I haven't run into really any other issues since. Still won't forget those eyes though. Monsters are real. Lighter ghost in the rain visited me. Back in the spring of 1999, in Beloit, Wisconsin, my mother and I were living with a family friend near 6th Street, not far from where my dad worked at Beloit Body Fender. It was a small house in a quiet neighborhood, the kind where sounds carried at night, and everything felt closer when it was dark. One evening, my cousin Crystal was watching me and a few other kids who had come over. We were crowded into the living room, toys scattered across the floor, the TV glowing softly in the background. I was only 5 or 6 years old. Outside, the rain was coming down hard, pounding the ground and tapping against the windows, drowning out everything else. There was a window right next to the TV, facing the side of the house. It was pitch black outside, so dark you couldn't see anything beyond the glass. No streetlights, no movement, just rain and darkness. For some reason, I felt the urge to look out the window. The moment I did, a lighter flicked on. Just for a second, a sharp, sudden flame in the darkness. No hand, no face, no body, just a brief glow of fire, floating where nothing should have been. The air felt like it dropped 10 degrees. My chest tightened, and I jumped onto the couch without even thinking. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. When my cousin asked what was wrong, all I could say was that someone was outside. She went to the window and looked out, then laughed it off and said there was nothing there. I didn't look again. I couldn't. But I knew what I had seen. There was no shadow, no shape, nothing that made sense. Just that lighter lighting in the rain, too close to the window, too deliberate. To this day, I don't know what it was. Maybe someone was outside messing with us. Or maybe it was something else entirely, something watching from the dark, letting me know it was there. Came across an incredibly creepy family a while back. Okay, I never really post anything on Reddit, mostly just reading. So please excuse me if I do or say anything that isn't common courtesy here. In around 2018 or 2019, I, a 25-year-old female, at the time I was 18 or 19, was living in Nebraska, where I grew up. I lived in the largest city in Nebraska, but it was still essentially surrounded by corn and wheat fields. The city was expanding, so rich people started building huge houses with giant properties on the edge of town as things proceeded to grow. All of that being said, I had a good friend whose parents' house was one of those big ones right on the blurring line between the fields and the city. My friends and I were constantly hanging out at his place because it was fun. They had tons of property to ride four-wheelers on, a hot tub, a huge living room for us to watch sports, and have reality TV binge sessions, etc. Plus, his parents were super cool, and we could drink out there as long as we stayed at the house. It was tons of fun even though I was, and am, quite scared of the dark, so I would just not go outside after a certain time because there was little lighting and the nearest neighbor was about a mile away. I always felt a weird energy driving to and from his place if it was late at night, but never had anything happen until one night. The drive out there was a long, winding, two-way road that had thick trees on both sides, and you passed one of the city's largest cemeteries on the way. Barely any lighting, of course, besides the street lamps every once in a while, and very little traffic. It's all inherently a bit creepy, and I'll admit to having sped through this section of road many times to get through it as quickly as possible. This specific night was perfect spring weather, so I was driving with my windows down listening to music, and it was around 10 p.m. I was coming around one of the curves in the road when I had to essentially slam my brakes on. Right in front of me, in the middle of the road, maybe 50 yards away, was what looked like a family. Again, picture a completely pitch black road with thick forests on both sides and only my headlights to show what was in front of me. There was a family of 3 or 4. A tall, slim woman, an average height and weight man, a child, short hair but couldn't tell the gender based on the clothing and couldn't see their face, maybe around 8 years old, and the mother was pushing a fucking stroller. Their clothes looked normal, not tattered but not nice. They also were not carrying any kind of light source, meaning before I arrived behind them in my car, they had been walking in the pitch black. They were all facing away from me, walking completely silent in the middle of the street, the same direction I was heading. I had turned my music down to hear if they were speaking or had their own music playing, but they didn't. The hairs on my arms immediately stood up. I came to a stop in the road behind them, obviously, and just sat there for a moment to let them move. They seemed to be completely unaffected by me and didn't even turn their heads slightly, nor did they attempt to move out of my way. I literally thought I was going insane, or that I was dreaming. It was so surreal. Before I had time to fully process and register what I was seeing and how truly strange it was, they all, at the same time, stopped walking and very slowly turned to face my car. This scared the absolute shit out of me. I honestly didn't even give myself enough time to look at their faces as they turned. I immediately threw my car in reverse and sent it backwards for probably a full 20 seconds before flipping a U-turn, nearly running myself off the road and booking it the other direction. The only thing I remember noticing is that the stroller looked to be completely empty. This was the part that sticks in my mind the most. I've never felt terror like that in my life. I checked my rearview mirror probably 1,000 times before getting to a main road, and never saw a glimpse of them. In fact, I never saw a glimpse of them ever again. I tried asking my friend and his family about it, only to essentially feel like I was insane because of the way they looked at me. Every time I tell this story, I get one of 3 reactions. They immediately think I'm fucking cuckoo, think I'm lying, or have had something sort of similar happen to them. I really don't care if no one believes me, honestly. It was, and still is, the creepiest thing to ever happen to me. I think about it all the time. It was either some weird-ass family trying to scare the shit out of someone, a distraction for an attempted robbery or assault, or it was something more sinister. I'm going to tell myself for probably the rest of my life that it was the first option. It was late August in Nelson, BC, when my family traveled for a regatta on beautiful Kootenai Lake. My sister Elizabeth, my father, and I drove our beat-up Dodge Dakota through winding mountain roads into town. The air was warm, and a haze from distant wildfires drifted over the hills, carrying the sweet, acrid scent of burning pine. Mountains rose around us like dark sentinels, their peaks catching the last light of day. Pines, cedars, maples, oaks, and aspens mixed together, their leaves whispering in shades of green and gold. Sunlight pierced through the canopy in slanting beams, spilling over the highway and guiding us toward the lake. Nelson appeared suddenly, a small city cradled between water and mountains, at once quaint and commanding. Heritage buildings of brick and stone lined the narrow streets like rows of old teeth, their painted signs fading into ghosts of older names. Hanging flower baskets swung gently from wrought iron lampposts. There was charm in the air, yes, but also something else, something watchful, like the town itself was holding its breath. The Hume Hotel rose above Baker Street, its century-old brick facade glowing in the waning light. It looked like a relic from another era, its windows glinting like dark eyes. We were tired from the drive and eager for dinner, but I remember even then feeling the building's presence. A weight, almost imperceptible but pressing. Our room was a standard 2-queen layout. When you entered, the bathroom door sat directly ahead. To the left was the bed my sister and I shared, to the right my father's. The bathroom created a sort of dividing corridor, with just another space to feel separate from one another. We unpacked in silence, each of us taking turns in the bathroom. My father was ready first and left to meet our rowing coach, Martin, in the lobby. My sister straightened her hair in the bathroom as I sat at the desk, writing a letter to my boyfriend at boot camp. The soft click of the iron punctuating my thoughts. That's when I heard the first knock. It was a polite, deliberate knock. 3 taps, just enough to make me think my father had forgotten his keys. I rose, opened the door, and stared into an empty hallway. The corridor stretched both ways, quiet and still, with not a single door open or footsteps retreating. I frowned, closing the door, and told myself it must have been my sister bumping against something in the bathroom. When she emerged, dressed and ready, I told her I'd be down shortly, and she left with her key. Alone, I finished sealing the envelope when a second knock came. This time it was louder, insistent. A cold ripple of unease crept down my back. My sister had her key, my father with Martin. Why knock, and why twice? Pressed my eye to the peephole, nothing. The hallway was utterly empty. No motion, no sound. I opened the door just a crack, peeking out. Still nothing. My heart thudded as I stepped back into the room. I told myself I was imagining it, grabbed my bag, and hurried down to meet the others. Dinner at Mike's place was warm and grounding. We laughed with Martin over steaming plates, the normalcy of it making me forget the unease upstairs. My father and Martin went to the lounge afterward, leaving my sister and me to return to our room. We slipped into bed, stomachs full, and moods light. That's when the faint scratching started from inside the bathroom wall. It was soft at first, like mice. We whispered back and forth, convincing ourselves that's all it was, until we fell into restless sleep. I dreamed all night but could not wake from it. Murky, oppressive nightmares that evaporated by morning, leaving only a heavy feeling in my chest. My sister, pale and tired, told me she'd heard footsteps pacing outside our door through the night. Our father chuckled when we asked if he'd noticed anything, brushing it off. His CPAP machine drowned out any sound, he said. The next day passed like a reprieve. We spent it at the lake, prepping boats and preparing for races the next day. After prep was finished, a couple of teammates, my family, and I went on an outing to explore the town. Nelson's shops and cafes were bright and inviting, a world away from the hotel's stillness. But that evening, after a team dinner at an Italian restaurant, our unease returned. We opened our hotel room door to a sight that made us stop cold. Every pillow in the room, from our beds, from the chairs, had been arranged in a perfect circle on my father's bed. In the center of the circle stood one long, cylindrical pillow, balanced upright as if by an unseen hand. The soft mattress should have made it impossible, but there it was, defying gravity. For a moment we said nothing, staring. Then my father exhaled sharply and began putting the pillows back, muttering something about housekeeping. We were too tired to argue. That night I couldn't sleep at all, listening to the faint sound of footsteps pacing up and down the hallway, never stopping. The next morning, race day, we fled the hotel early. We spent the day at the lake, exhausted but triumphant, staying out until nightfall celebrating with teammates. Yet each time we returned to the Hume, my sister and I felt it pressing on us, the sense that something unseen disapproved of our presence, that the walls themselves were leaning closer. On our final morning, after breakfast at the hotel's general store restaurant, curiosity got the better of us. We asked our server if the hotel was haunted. Her face lit up, not in amusement, but recognition. She told us of renovations stirring up activity, of a maid whose cleaning cart had been thrown across the hallway, of guests whispering about unseen hands leaving scratches where none had been. Strangely, we felt relieved to know we weren't alone in our experience. When we left the hotel later that day and drove out of town, Nelson looked as serene as it had when we first arrived. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the Hume Hotel had been watching us the whole time, and that it was not yet finished with its story. I killed my friend. When I, a 21-year-old female, was 5 years old, I accidentally killed my friend as we were playing. We were jumping on a trampoline together. She was jumping very high, and when she landed, I playfully pushed her. I didn't think it was dangerous at all. She lost her balance and fell badly, landing on her neck. I got scared and started crying, and I ran to tell her parents what had happened. At that time, I didn't understand how serious the accident was. I thought she would recover. However, a few days later, I found out that she didn't survive. I was very young then and didn't fully understand the consequences of my actions. Nowadays, I feel deep guilt about what happened. Sometimes when I go to sleep, I still see the accident in my mind. I am glad that therapy exists and that I can get help dealing with these feelings. A white figure keeps chasing me. There's a white figure chasing me since I was little. I always have this thing on my mind. I'm a big fan of those videos on YouTube talking about these scary stories and thought I should share my longest and somewhat still ongoing experience. For background, my earliest memory of this happening wasn't even mine. It was my brothers who told me about it. Basically, when I was around 6 or 7, my brothers went on a sleepover to my cousins without me. I was a loner for all my life. I didn't care if my brothers did that kind of stuff without me. Not that it matters to the story, though. Anyways, they came back from the sleepover and they told me on how they saw a tall, skinny, and uncanny faceless white thing watching them from outside when they were trying to go to sleep. My cousin's house is very haunted from what I heard. There's a lot of stories I could go over in that house. Anyways, they told me about it. That's my most earliest experience from what I remember. Ever since they told me that story, it had been in our lives since. My first encounter with it was when I was 8, and I lived in this trailer park. The living room had long windows on the side, showing the neighborhood inside our living room. Me and my brother were planning to sleep in the living room that day. My brother was on the TV playing a game, while I was on my laptop at the time. I looked up and saw the white thing. Perfectly matched my brother's description. However, when I actually averted my eyes to look at it properly, it was gone. I told my brother and he immediately believed me, not questioning me. Since then, this thing has been following me since. However, it started to chase me every time I've been seeing it now. I don't know what it's like to my brothers who know of it. I haven't really come around to question them about it. But every time I see glimpses of it, I see it running to me. But it vanishes before I fully see it. Eventually, I moved out of the county I lived in all my life due to financial problems. In this county, I never saw it. In fact, I completely forgot about it, actually, until I moved back to my born county. However, I've only saw it once or twice. It's still running, though it has gotten further away instead. The scariest encounter is when I was on the couch in the living room, and an overwhelming feeling of being watched washed over me. I looked to where it was coming from, and it was up the stairs, peeking at me, staring at me. I wasn't running. It wasn't fully showing itself, but I saw it. Then it averted its head out of view. I haven't seen it since then. More background info. I come from a family that has always dealt with the paranormal. My auntie has a haunted doll collection, my brothers have their own weird instances, but I really don't know. I am 51, that encounter was from last year, a little before my 51st birthday. I would also like to say that I have many other paranormal encounters besides just this one. Just this one is the most longest one that has followed me everywhere besides when I left the county for a year. By the way, just writing this or even thinking of it causes an overwhelming feeling of being watched, a feeling of anxiousness, and it causes me to have headaches too. Thank you for reading. I'd love to get some feedback on this. Thank you. I had awesome parents who let me sleep in the living room on weekend nights when I was very young because my sister was a light sleeper and I could stay up till dawn. But of course I always end up sleeping on the couch because Nick at Night made me tired. So one night I woke up to this prickly feeling, like an instinct, just bolted into a sitting position and stared out the front window. We lived in rural Georgia, so you can imagine the magnitude of trees. In perfect light cast from the moon, I see a silhouette of something in this fucking tree. The family dog dashes to the window and is snarling into the glass. Terrified, I run into my parents' room and try to explain to my parents that there is a strange person outside. Dad grabs something defensive and darts outside with the dogs to beat the wax off the hothead. I tremble in Mama's arms until Dad comes home and says he saw no one and to go to bed. I decide to sleep in my regular bedroom. I fill my sister in as to what happened. Dad is making regular rounds in the house with a cup of coffee. We're all still, and I finally think I can sleep. Nope. I notice the man outside my window. From what I can see in the moonlight, he shushes me and runs away. Just turns around to run a straight line away. I swear I couldn't stop crying for what felt like hours. The same thing kinda happened with me. I was asleep in the living room and was suddenly awake, like wide awake. I hear my cat growling and looking over across the room, and I look over too, and see a big silhouette, faintly human-shaped. I couldn't see any eyes or anything, but I knew it was looking at me. I slowly sat up and leaned in closer to look at it, and it didn't move. I probably sat there for 10 minutes locked in eye contact with it, before a sudden feeling of peace washed over me, and I laid down and comfortably went to sleep. I woke up the next morning and saw nothing there that could make that shape. It is safe to say I don't sleep in the living room anymore. When I was a young child, I had the same dream every night for years about drowning when a huge wave swept over me and I sank to the bottom. Years later, I had a temp job delivering mail one summer during college. I saw this old lady sitting on a front porch waiting for me. When I got up there, she looked at me and said in a foreign accent, "You drowned when Oceania sank beneath the waves." Freaked me out. My house sits farther back in the lot than most other houses. It is a strange layout as well. The sidewalk runs the length of the living room and ends at the front porch, which lets into the living room. Large windows that do not open allow great light to get into the living room, but at the cost of no privacy. The rest of my family was on vacation, and having the house to myself, I decided I would get smashed. Well, I passed out on the couch in the living room at about 9, when I realized I was too scared to walk back to my room. The couch is right underneath these big windows. I woke up suddenly, not knowing why. I had a severe case of the chills, and I could not figure out why. Then the banging started. It came from right above me. I did not move, but I opened my eyes and looked up at the window. Someone was standing there pounding on the glass. Without moving, I looked at the cable box. It was around 3 in the morning. The banging continues. Then it stops suddenly, but I still did not move. Suddenly it commences again, coming from 2 different directions now. Someone is banging on the window and another person is banging on the front door. They kept doing it, would not go away. Finally, after about 40 minutes, they quit. It was the most terrifying event I can recall at the moment. It made me a nervous wreck after that. I called a friend the next day to see if he could come over and stay for the rest of the week, and his response was, "What the fuck for? So that we could both be murdered in our sleep? Thanks a lot, asshole." I was 17 and I had just gotten my license. Back in high school, my friends and I made it a mission to find abandoned houses to throw parties in. We had a few good candidates, but the motherlode was this house I would pass on my way home from work. It was an undeveloped shell of a huge home with a large property in the back. I had told one of my friends about it, and one day before we went to see a movie, I took him to the house. It was about dusk in summer, so I had my headlights on. I pulled into the front of the house, and we were there for like 10 seconds tops before we pulled back to go to the main road. A minute later, this big truck pulls up behind us with its high beams on and riding our ass. My friend and I took note of it, but paid it no mind as we headed back to the main road. At the light, I turned right, but the truck cut through the gas station at the corner and blocked us off. Out of the truck comes this big hulk of a man, and my friend and I are shitting our pants. He raps on the window and I roll it down. Now the really freaky part is that this is a busy road and now there was no one in sight. He asked us what we were doing at the house, and I quickly lied and said we were making a U-turn. He stares at us for a few seconds, smiles, and sends us on our way. To this day, the house remains unfinished, and I'm convinced it's a drug operation of some sort. When I was about 10, all of my cousins and siblings were over, about 10 of us there. The parents and grandparents were out for an adult dinner, so it was just the kids sitting around watching a few movies when all of a sudden the house shook and there was a large flash coming from the backyard. It felt as if a bomb dropped. We all heard, felt, and saw it, and as a pack we ran into the hallway. The eldest cousin in the group debated on calling the police but opted to call the parents. After a few minutes we gained our courage and ventured out into the living room again, this time with weapons, just in case. After a half hour with no other issues, the parents came home and thought we were insane. There was nothing wrong with the backyard and no neighbors reported anything. It's been 10 years and we still talk about it, trying to figure out what it was. This has been the scariest thing to happen to me by far. I once sat across from a guy who told me about killing his girlfriend, him cutting her into pieces and boiling her head. He explained why he killed her and wished he could talk to the parents so they could understand that what he did was a good thing. It wasn't. I sat with him for 45 minutes, and as he went into detail, was the most surreal 45 minutes of my life. Source: worked in a max security mental health facility. Okay, so this happened to me last summer when I was back at my parents' house during the holidays. It was around 3 a.m., and I was in my room on my computer when I got a call from my sister. Now, that was already a little bit weird since my sister's room is just down the hallway from mine, and she could have just came in my room. I went to pick up, and the call ended as soon as I reached for the phone. I figured that she wanted to speak with me, so I got up and went to her room. As soon as I reached her door, she started screaming that someone was in the room with her, so I busted in, and of course, nobody was there. After she stopped crying, she told me that she woke up and saw a dark shadow just centimeters from her face, and that's when she screamed. So I told her that she called me. She tells me that her phone is not in her room, and that she was actually sleeping. Sure enough, her phone is actually downstairs in her purse. The weird part is that I have the log of her call on my phone, but she doesn't. Never managed to explain this one. This is not supernatural creepy, but it is one of the most disturbing and surreal experiences of my life. One early morning a few short years ago, I am walking to my bus stop and eating a banana. It is dark, misty, and around 5 a.m., and I am internally debating something trivial, like if I want my daily Starbucks before or after the commute. As I approach the dimly lit corner on my street, a tall man in a black mask steps out of the dark alleyway to my left. Sleepy and disoriented, I barely acknowledge him when he shouts, "Put down your fucking purse!" and points his gun to my head. Things start to click. The man says, "Put down your bags!" and I tell him, Okay, I'm putting them down over here." He orders me to walk over to him, toward the alley, and, "Get down on the fucking ground!" And I agree. "I'm coming, okay." My heart is beating a million miles a minute, and my hands still smell sticky with banana. I know I need to get away. I don't know why, but my mouth won't stop working. "Look, see, I'm on the ground. My stuff is over there. Please just take my stuff." But he doesn't like it. "Shut the fuck up, okay?" He gets on top of me and puts the gun to my head. At this point, I should mention the fact that I'm on my way to coach a high school practice, and I'm dressed like a dude. Huge baggy pants, hat, jacket. If not for my telltale voice, I'd look like a prepubescent 90s rap star. Anyway, as the guy gets on top of me, gun to my head, he looks at me and pauses. I can't tell you why I know this, but I swear at this moment, it clicks for him that I'm a woman. He gets off of me, stands up, and points to the dark alley. "Come with me." My stomach starts to hurt. I remember that there had been a recent rash of sexual assaults in my neighborhood, during the daytime no less. When the man points down that dirty alleyway, my internal voice speaks the fuck up.
"There's no way in hell you are going to go down without a fight. But he has a fucking gun, you dipshit."
"Fucking follow me," the real voice, his voice, hollers. So I do what I do best. I talk. "I'm coming. I'm following you," I call out to him. And the man makes a crucial mistake. He believes me. I take 1, 2 tiny steps backwards towards the sidewalk, and he turns his body and his gun toward the alley. This is my moment. I take a deep breath, tuck my head down in case he starts shooting, and start sprinting away. I hear a voice screaming in a high-pitched wail before I realize that it's mine. After running 6 or 7 blocks, I head back to my apartment, hoping he's not there to see where I lived. The police check out the alleyway an hour later, but the potential attacker is long gone. The only evidence of the encounter is my banana peel browning in the alleyway and the adrenaline rush that I couldn't shake for days. I would be lying if I said that this experience doesn't bother me still, but I'm so fortunate to mainly be haunted by the what-ifs and not the what-dids. My grandmother swore by the story till her dying day. It was during the war in London, and my dad was a baby. She was bombed out of her house and was staying with a friend. The friend had her set up in a room on the top floor. Anyway, she was taking my dad upstairs to bed when a figure materialized on the stairs telling her not to sleep in that room tonight. She noped back downstairs and told her friend that she and my dad were sleeping in the sitting room that night. Her friend was annoyed but agreed. That night a bomb exploded near the house and the roof caved in, right on top of my dad's cot. He would have been killed. A visitor who never left. I was 18 years old when this happened. At the time, I was living at home with my parents, who had recently moved far out into the countryside. Their farm was part of a tiny rural cluster, about 7 farms on one road. That night, I was home alone with our dog, a large Labrador I was looking after until my parents came back the next day. It was around 11 p.m. I was lying on the upstairs couch with a movie playing quietly on the TV, half asleep and relaxed in the stillness of the house. Then 3 loud knocks shattered the silence. They came from the front door downstairs, the door directly at the bottom of the staircase leading up to where I was. The sound was sharp and deliberate, not hesitant, not accidental. My dog sprang out of his bed beside me and started barking immediately. I tried to calm him, but he was beyond listening. He bolted down the stairs and positioned himself in front of the door, barking and growling into the darkness. Outside, the courtyard was completely black. I stood halfway down the staircase, my pulse hammering in my ears, and called out, "Hello?" No reply, just silence. I called again, louder this time. Still nothing. The quiet that followed felt wrong, thick and watchful. After a moment that felt much longer than it was, I forced myself to move. I stepped down the rest of the stairs, my dog still tense at the door. Carefully, I opened it just enough to lean my head outside. There was nothing there. No lights, no movement, no footsteps fading away, only the dark courtyard and the cold night air. It felt like whoever or whatever had knocked had simply vanished. I shut the door quickly and locked every entrance in the house. My hands were shaking as I called my parents. They immediately contacted our neighbors, a couple who lived nearby. Within minutes they arrived. I explained what had happened, still trying to steady my voice. They decided to walk around the barns and check the property. Those 10 minutes felt endless. When they returned, they said they hadn't found anything. Still, they strongly suggested I come sleep in their guest room for the night. I told them it was probably just me overreacting if nothing had been found, but they kept insisting, more seriously than I expected, that it would be safer to come with them. I refused. I couldn't leave my dog alone. Before leaving, they told me to call immediately if anything else happened, no matter how small. When my parents returned the next day, they installed surveillance cameras outside the front door. They said it was to make me feel safer, especially since I was often home alone with the dog. A few months later, my parents were celebrating their 25th wedding anniversary. During the evening, I found myself talking with my female neighbor and thanked her again for coming over that night. Her expression shifted. She went quiet for a moment, like she was weighing whether to say what was on her mind. Then she told me she has to be honest with me. That night, shortly before my parents called her, she had been outside saying goodnight to her horses. The yard was completely still. No wind, no distant cars, nothing. That's when she heard it. Footsteps. Clear, deliberate footsteps crunching through the gravel in our courtyard. Not random, not hurried, slow, controlled, like someone was walking with purpose in the dark. She said the sound carried unnaturally well in the silence. Then the footsteps stopped, right there in the yard. She waited to hear them continue, to hear someone speak, a door, anything. But there was only a heavy, suffocating silence. And just moments later, my parents called her about the knocking. She told me she never heard those footsteps leave. The guy who followed me home. Okay, one time I was riding my dirt bike around my neighborhood, and I was like 3 blocks away from my house, and some guy was like watching me after my dirt bike was about to die, so I was walking into my house, and this guy started to follow me on my way home. When I saw him, I started to run with the bike, and he started to chase me. So it was only downhill till I get to my house, so with the last of my battery I used it to get down. He saw me get home and left. Was he going to kidnap me or worse? That's the best I could do with that story. It took me like 5 takes to do it. It's one long run-on sentence. There's no punctuation until the end, which is the last sentence. Everything else is one sentence. This person is not very good at writing. And I'm sorry if it didn't make sense, guys, because it just doesn't make sense. It shouldn't make sense to anybody, really. Apparently they got chased, and they were on their dirt bike, but it died, and when they got home, the person stopped chasing them. Pretty eventful. Does this happen to you or not? Okay, so every year on January 19th, I have a weird dream. It's me in my house, somebody breaks in and ties me up in a chair. He then gets all of my family and kills them in front of me. All I hear is them screaming, and the guy goes to me and says, "You are next." And then I wake up at 3:33 a.m., and I just can't go to sleep. Every year this happens, I always wake up at the same time. Tell me if this means something or if this happens to you too. Again, guys, I'm so sorry. These people are idiots. Terrible writing. I think I was almost kidnapped. I learned about this when I asked my mother about the strange experience. So this was around late November or early December, and I was going to my first therapy appointment in years. The place was far away, so we needed to take the bus. My mother was with me, and it was absolutely cold outside, raining. We had to go to another bus stop to wait for a different transport to reach my destination. Something I'd like to bring up. I'm in my late 20s, but have a youthful look. I've been mistaken to be a teenager before. This will be important for later. So while my mother and I wait for the second bus, this man in a black hoodie comes up and starts talking, saying hello and whatnot. I was absolutely uninterested and just wanted the bus to come because I was freezing and didn't want to talk. But suddenly my mother steps in front and gives a blunt response to this guy. Afterwards, he backs off and walks along with his bike. I thought it was weird, but I got the sinking feeling when my mother says, "Get in front of me," in a serious tone. Obviously, I stand in front of her, while our bus has finally arrived and I get in first. A few days after that, I got curious and decided to ask my mother what that was all about. And what she told me still creeps me out. Apparently, the guy in the black hoodie was trying to talk to me directly. He wasn't paying any mind to her until she stepped up, giving some sort of look at him. The tone she used when she spoke to him was nowhere near cordial. It was serious, borderline threatening. But what she said next still disturbs me. After the guy effed off with his bike, my mother saw a van that would slow down near us. It gets worse, because she also saw a man just texting on his phone out in the cold rain. The man didn't have an umbrella, just texted on his phone. She mentioned the van circled around the area a few times and the man was still on his phone. Another thing to mention is I did see that man in the black hoodie come back again. I thought it was weird, wondering why the hell was this guy riding around this freezing-ass weather in the same area. But after she explained, it made a lot more sense to me and I got much more paranoid after that. Which, to be honest, I didn't even think that was possible. Now, I can't say for certain whether this was an attempt of human trafficking, but there was just too many eerie coincidences for it to be anything else. I don't know what I saw, but I have pictures of it. I grew up in Missouri, the kind of place where nothing ever really happened. Moberly was just another dot on the map. Brick buildings, railroad tracks, cornfields stretching out until the sky swallowed them. I'd lived there my whole life. Gone to the same high school my parents did. Driven the same back roads since I was 14. That's probably why it took me so long to realize something was wrong. It started during my junior year. Late fall, when the sun went down too early and the air smelled like dead leaves and cold metal. I walked home most days instead of taking the bus. I'd cut through a shortcut behind an old abandoned building near the tracks. Everyone called it the feed mill, even though it hadn't been used in decades. One afternoon, I heard footsteps behind me. I slowed down. They slowed down too. I told myself it was just someone messing around. Kids from school like to scare each other back there, but the steps didn't sound right. They were uneven, like whoever was walking didn't know how long their stride was supposed to be. Sometimes I'd hear dragging, sometimes a sharp tap, like bone on concrete. I turned around. No one was there. The air felt thicker, like before a storm, and the silence pressed in on my ears. I hurried home, heart racing, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been watching me from just out of sight. After that, it happened more often. I'd catch movement in windows that reflected the street behind me, something tall and pale that vanished the second I looked directly at it. Teachers would call my name in the hallway, but when I answered, they'd swear they hadn't said anything. Once I heard my mom call me from downstairs while she was still at work. That's when I started losing sleep. The night I really saw it was after a football game. I was cutting through the same shortcut, hoodie pulled tight against the cold. The moon was bright enough that I could see the feed mill clearly, its broken windows like dark, empty eyes. Something stood beside it. It was shaped like a person, but wrong in every detail. Too tall, too thin. Its arms almost hung to its knees, and its head tilted at an angle that made my neck hurt just looking at it. Its skin looked stretched tight and pale, like it had never seen the sun, but somehow knew what a human was supposed to look like. It couldn't move. It shifted its weight, joints clicking softly, and when it stepped forward, I realized it had been trying to stand like a person and failing. Each step was a correction. Then it opened its mouth. "Hey." My voice. Exactly my voice. I felt sick. My hands shook so badly I dropped my phone. The thing tilted its head further, studying me, and its face pulled into something that might have been a smile. Its eyes reflected the moonlight, wide and empty, like it didn't understand fear, only imitation. I ran. I didn't stop until I reached my front door, fumbling with my keys, sobbing harder than I ever had. I didn't tell anyone. What was I supposed to say? That something was copying me? That it lived by the tracks? But sometimes when I walk home now, I hear footsteps behind me that match mine perfectly. And every once in a while, when I pass the feed mill, I see fresh footprints in the dust. They're human. Almost. Is it normal? I don't really know how to start this, but I feel like I need to share this. I don't really know if it's really weird or if it's something completely normal and I'm just worried for nothing, but I think it started when I was around 5. It started with the door. That one door is facing my entrance door. It's like an exit, you know? Well, I've always been petrified of that door, to the point where if we had gone for a walk and we had to go home, I would be sobbing because I was really scared of that door. And I, till this day, don't know exactly why. Because I didn't watch horror things, like scary movies or creepy stuff in general, since I come from a religious family, and these things were banned. And after that door, it just went downhill, being scared of the idea of sleeping alone because I felt things, saw things, heard things, and I ended up sleeping with my bed next to my parents until I was 10. All my childhood, I had horrible nightmares really often, like not normal scary nightmares of children my age. Then came 13 years old, one of the worst years of my life. From hearing people scream through my headphones, to hearing my mom's voice calling my name from outside the door, to seeing that creature at the corner of my room every now and then, to waking up having panic attacks, shaking, crying, and feeling someone behind me. Even the dreams started to get worse and worse, each and every one of them more horrific than the other. Sometimes about my family, sometimes about me. I would wake up in sweats, sometimes even crying. But I hid it all from my family. I would only share it with my lifelong best friend, whom words can't express how much I trust. Acting like everything was fine in front of my family, even though it was a battle every day not to look crazy or possessed for admitting all of the things that had been happening to me. Until one day, the night was unbearable. I woke up shaking so much I thought I was going to die. The unshakable feeling that someone or something was right behind me, watching me sleep and waiting for the right moment to kill me. I gathered all of my courage after a couple minutes that felt like hours, and I woke up my brother, who was sleeping next to my bed that night. I tapped his shoulder over and over to wake him up, and when he finally woke up, the view he saw must have been horrible. Me in sweat, sobbing, literally bawling my eyes out, asking him, "Is there someone behind me? I'm scared." He told me no, brushed me off, and went back to sleep. The next morning he told my mom, and she asked me if everything was all right and told me, "You just have to pray. It's in your head." The thing is, that's all I've been doing for these past years. Pray. Pray for it to stop, but it just seems to get worse. A couple months ago, we moved to a new house, and I had a little hope that maybe it would finally stop. But no, I still hear those voices, see things from the corner of my eyes at the same places every time. And one day, I was in the stairs outside the apartment and I heard the door from my mom's room literally fly open and close super hard, 2 to 3 times over and over. There was no one in the house. They were all outside, and all of the windows were closed. At night, I hear people walking, like on top of my room, and I thought, oh, it has to be the neighbors, until I realized we were on the highest floor of the building, a really high one. It was human walking. I would recognize animals very easily. It was 2 by 2 with a rhythm. I'm sharing this because I don't know if it's legitimate to be scared or if I'm just making things up, and it's not that big of a deal. Knowing I'm pretty rational as a person, I don't know what to think. Sorry for the grammar, English is not my first language, and sorry if it doesn't make sense, I don't usually write on Reddit. The night I called the police on a ghost. Although it's absurdity, This is a real story and happened quite recently. I am young, not disclosing but old enough to be on here. So me being me, I was on a Discord call with my friend. It was dusk out and all the streetlights on my street were on. After a while of peacefully chatting with my friend, I noticed one of the streetlights was flickering in an uneven pattern. I showed my friend who drives a sailboat with his dad a lot the streetlight on camera to see if it was Morse code or something. I've asked him if he was lying and he swears on his life. He said,
Bro, get out of there. That's Morse code for SOS.
I laughed it off. What a coincidence. That was until all the streetlights shut off all at once. Straight out of a fucking Stranger Things, they all turned back on in the same flickering pattern. And then, boom. A transformer pretty much right above me blew the hell up. It sounded like lightning, louder than lightning, but oh man did it scare the hell out of me. I ran inside explaining to my friend what happened and why it sounded like a thermonuclear bomb went off in my neighborhood. And once again, straight out of fucking Stranger Things, all the car alarms on my street went off. What the hell? At this point I was shitting bricks. Literally my parents' cars in my own garage went off as well. By the way, my parents weren't home. They were picked up by a friend to go to a dinner, so I scrambled to find both their keys and turn the alarms off. I was detoxing on the call with my friend and cuddling with my dogs, who were equally as scared. I swear to God, as if it couldn't get any weirder, all the lights in my room turned red. Now before someone calls bullshit, let me explain. All my lights are Govee. I connected my Govee to my Alexa. The default color for all my lights is red. Even though I knew this, it still pushed me beyond my breaking point, and I started shaking, bro. After my room lights all fully shut off, that's when I decided to dial the magical number. 911, what's your emergency? This is what I said verbatim, by the way. Excuse my language, but there's some weird shit going on in Redacted. Yeah, we've gotten calls about a blown transformer. Is that what you mean? Well, there's that, and then all the street lights, and my room lights, and the car alarms, straight out of Stranger Things. Okay, we're gonna send out power units to investigate, okay? Alright, thank you, ma'am. What happened next was a lot of talking to neighbors, Facebook, and my parents about what happened that night. The police told me that there was a major electrical fail in a fiber optic cable that caused a spark that knocked out or messed with a lot of other power utilities. They didn't have an explanation to the car alarms though, which left me antsy. Thank you for reading. My first paranormal event. 11 years later, I still have no explanation. I was 12 at the time, and I shared a room with my 15-year-old brother. We shared bunk beds, which was pushed up against one of the bedroom walls. On the opposite end was a big window, maybe 1.5 meters wide. Directly underneath we had 2 sets of IKEA drawers. Between those drawers and the walls was about 4 to 5 centimeters of space to allow the curtains we had hanging to freely move back and forth. The window could only be opened from the inside, and on the outside we had the typical Aussie security bars that are diamond-shaped with a fly screen behind. Therefore, there was no access from the outside. One night around 6 p.m., my cousins were over for dinner. Everyone was at the table. I got bored and went to my room. I remember it still being light outside. I sat on my bed and went on my tablet. I had only been there for about 2 minutes when I noticed movement in my peripheral vision. The curtain was moving. At first I thought maybe it was just airflow, but it wasn't swaying. It wasn't the whole curtain shifting. It looked like something was pulling it open from behind. Not dramatically, just the specific kind of movement fabric makes when someone grips it and tugs. The section being pulled scrunches first, tight and gathered, and the rest follows. That's exactly what I saw. A section of the curtain tightening inward and sliding across as if fingers were dragging it. But there were no fingers, no hand, no shape, and there couldn't have been anyone behind it. There was only a few centimeters of space between the drawers and the wall. The window was closed. The bars were outside. It wasn't windy. The movement was deliberate, controlled. I remember just staring at it for a second, trying to make sense of it. Then I felt that drop in my stomach. I threw my tablet onto the bed and ran straight back to the dining room without looking back. Nothing else happened. No noises, no footsteps, no explanation. It sounds minor when I tell it now, a curtain moving. But I'm 23 now, and in all those years, nothing has unsettled me more than that specific movement. The way the fabric tightened like it was being held. I've tried to come up with a logical explanation, air pressure, static, a draft, but I know what I saw, and it didn't move like air. The end. The creep I saw in the middle of the night. Hello, Reddit. Please keep in mind that English is not my first language. Around 2005, my family and I just moved to a new house in a new area of the town. Kind of desert area. I live in the Middle East, and we were one of the first houses there. One late night, I got up to get some water, so I headed to the kitchen. The way from my room to the kitchen was not far, and you had to pass by the living room. So I maneuvered around the couch to get to the kitchen. As I was drinking water, I saw from the kitchen window a reflection of someone sitting on the couch. I turned, and what I saw scares me to this day. There was a man dressed in all white and a white turban looking at me. I knew this because he was almost glowing, and I knew it was a man because when he smiled, his teeth were so white and shiny that I could see his features. He had a creepy smile, and he did not feel human. I was frozen in fear, not moving, because in my head it felt like if I moved, he would come at me. Then suddenly a voice whispered in my ear, saying my name, and it made me turn so fast to look, but no one was behind me, and when I looked back, the person was gone. That moment I ran so fast toward my bedroom and locked the door. Since that day, I always keep a bottle of water in my room. The demon in my house. I woke up on a random morning to get ready for school. I think I was less than 10, but I don't remember exactly how old. I got ready, got dressed, and was waiting to be taken. I noticed before leaving the house that my dad was still sleeping in his room. It was dark, but not pitch black. My mom was in the bathroom nearby, I think. I go inside the room, take 2 steps in, and this is the point where you might think I'm mentally insane, or believe me. I saw what I could only describe as a tall ghost demon. It was floating, wearing an almost see-through white dress, weird gray long hair, and gray dark face with no expression. Its nails weird and abnormally long. It floated towards me very statically for 2 seconds. I was shocked and I took a few steps back, looked up and saw nothing. Weird, huh? Long black-haired woman. I had an experience that felt completely real. I was around 7 years old at the time, and I am 100% sure I did not imagine it. It has stayed with me all these years, never leaving my mind. So here I am, finally sharing it. Back in the summer of 2001, my mom, my cousin, and I spent a weekend at a friend's apartment at the Oak Ridge Apartments in Madison, Wisconsin. One night, the moon was bright outside, lighting the room just enough to make the darkness feel heavier. We all shared one bedroom. I slept on the floor, my mother slept on the top bunk, and my cousin slept on the bed across the room. Our friend had to work that night, so it was just the 3 of us. Sometime around 2 or 3 in the morning, I suddenly woke up. I could hear footsteps and low voices outside the room. Fear crept in immediately, and I stayed completely still. It was dark, and I couldn't see much. Then, out of nowhere, 3 dark figures entered the room. I didn't know who they were, but they felt evil. Wrong in a way I can't fully explain. One of them looked like a small, older man with a mustache holding a baby. Another was a woman with long black hair. I couldn't see their faces clearly, but I had a strong sense of what they looked like. They walked over and sat near my cousin's bed, whispering to each other. The woman with the long black hair sat directly on the bed beside her. Eventually, they left the room. I gathered just enough courage to get up and tap my cousin on the shoulder to wake her. I was shaking. When she woke up, she told me it was nothing and told me to go back to sleep. As soon as I lay back down, I heard them coming back. I quickly returned to my spot on the floor as they re-entered the room. Again, they went to my cousin's bed and began whispering. The woman sat down on the bed once more. I was terrified. I didn't know who these people were or what they wanted. I struggled to breathe, barely gasping for air. Then the woman looked down at me. That was enough. I jumped up, ran to my mother's bed, and started screaming, "Wake up, wake up." I glanced back and remember seeing something small rushing toward me. My mother jolted awake and turned on the light. There was nothing there. I was confused, terrified, and shaken for the rest of the night. What made it worse was that about a month later, I saw them again, this time at my aunt's house. It was the same woman with the long black hair. She came out of my aunt's closet while I was sleeping. In a dream, she tried to kidnap me. After that, I never saw them again, and I hope I never do. I don't know if anyone else had an experience like this, but whatever it was truly evil. Thing breathing in the dark. Ever since I was a kid, sometimes I felt like being watched in the dark. That's somewhat common with kids that have some sort of trauma. Scary movies never really got to me. Only unnerving stuff that would be completely normal to other people. I was never afraid of something or someone, just afraid that something unknown would peek its head out from the doorframe. This was always a part of me in that stage before you sleep, where you're in the dark in your bed when I was a kid, and I remember being scared of being uncovered no matter how hot it got. All that eventually left me as I got older and became less scared, and nowadays that problem is non-existent to me. But yesterday, when I went to sleep late, the incident happened. Before I actually got to sleep in the pitch black, it was all quiet, till I started hearing something breathing very fast. I even felt the air on my face for every breath it took, like something was looming over me. I slightly opened my eyes and I saw some sort of movement in there. and I hoped it wouldn't notice I was awake. I didn't know what to do, and I stayed perfectly still, wondering what I could do, as I was quickly overheating. Then I started praying, and the breathing stopped. Whatever shape or thing that was looming over me disappeared. I don't know what that was, but my praying worked, and I'm glad it did. Now that could be explained with the autokinetic effect, or the AC malfunctioning that day, but I believe that what happened that day wasn't normal.
No one understands me anymore. I mean that, literally. This all began 3 weeks ago, after my almost year-long relationship with my ex ended. Things were amazing with Lily at first. She was hot, way out of my league, but what really made me fall for her was how well we meshed together. How seamlessly we understood each other. She met my every need, big or small. Before I'd even put my fork down, she'd be reaching for the tomato sauce and passing it to me. I'd sink into the couch, in the mood for a good horror movie, and before I could suggest the idea, she'd smile and say, "This feels like a horror movie night." I'd wake up from some pretty heated dreams, and she'd already be swinging her leg over me, ready to start the morning exactly how I imagined it. So after 5 months, I made the very smart, not at all too soon decision of asking her to move in with me. It was amazing. At first. She was the first girl I'd ever met who didn't care if I played video games for hours, because she'd just sit beside me the whole time, watching me play. She didn't care what I did, as long as I was within reach. Always within reach. Her nails would trail circles on the back of my neck, glide along my arms, or she'd just rest her foot on top of mine. She constantly wanted me in touching distance. I loved it at first. I knew we were probably getting a bit too attached to each other. I stopped seeing my friends as much. I called my family less. Then one day after work, the guys invited me to the pub. They made me realize it'd been way too long since I hung out with them. I didn't see the problem and texted Lily to let her know I'd be home late. Just a few pints. There was a skimpy at the bar, so I didn't stay long. I didn't even look at her. I averted my eyes out of respect for Lily. I was a good guy, a good boyfriend. When I got home, Lily was livid. "You went to a Skimpy's bar?" There wasn't a bar in our rural mining town without Skimpy's, and I barely even stayed an hour, but I didn't argue. I felt guilty at the hurt in her eyes as she sobbed into my chest. I didn't realize she'd be so hurt by it, but of course she would. I never should have gone, so I stopped going out to the pub with the guys. I thought it was the Skimpy's that were the problem, so when the guys invited me out to play golf, I thought it'd be no big deal. It was completely innocent. Wrong. She was livid at me again. "You don't even like golf," she cried out. "I just wanted to see my friends," I said carefully. "So you'd rather spend time with them than me?" "Babe." I was shocked seeing this insecure side of her I'd never seen before, and definitely a little off-put. Was she being serious? "I am allowed to see my friends, right?" I said it slowly, hoping it'd make her understand how ridiculous she was being. And it did. She sighed, her anger dissipating, replaced by the sort of sadness that reminded me of a kicked puppy. It made my stomach clench in guilt. "I'm sorry, I just missed you," she said. After that, she stopped being livid whenever I went out without her. Instead, she punished me quietly. If I came home from playing pool at a friend's house, she'd barely look at me, barely speak. I'd feel sick with guilt even though I knew I'd done nothing wrong. The breaking point was lunch with my mom. I got home and she gave me the exact same attitude she always did, acting all cold and distant and miserable, which in turn made me miserable. I'd had enough. I was sick of it. "Are you serious, Lily? You're seriously going to make me feel bad about seeing my own mother? The woman who gave birth to me. I'm sorry, she said, tears in her eyes. I just get jealous. Of my mom? That's insane. She stepped closer. Well, maybe I just want you all to myself. Is that really so bad? She murmured softly. For a moment, I was in a trance, forgetting why I was mad in the first place as she stared up at me from under her lashes, her soft lips pressed into a little pout. I knew if she touched me, I'd cave. So I stepped back. I don't think I can do this anymore, I said quietly, refusing to meet her eyes. If I did, I wouldn't be able to say it. I think we need a break. A break? She scoffed. Or a breakup? I didn't answer. Let me make the decision for you, she said. Good luck finding anyone else who understands you like I do. She packed her things and left. I stayed silent, even though one word from me would have stopped her, even though I wanted to stop her. This was for the best. For me and for her. She was too attached. It wasn't healthy for either of us. The weekend was hell. I'd sit in front of my console staring at the loading screen, remembering her fingers in my hair, her constant touch, her steady, comforting presence, and then the house would feel unbearably empty. When I went back to work, everyone could tell I was in a foul mood. At the time, I didn't notice anything strange about that day. Looking back now, I don't know how I missed it. Everything all right, man? You and your missus have a fight? Greg, my older manager, asked me. He was a good friend, always had been. I fucked it all up. I mumbled without thinking. It was the only sentence my brain seemed capable of forming. Oh, you're both doing well then. That's great, man. Must just be a bit hungover, right? Greg said with a wink. I frowned at him, but I was too wrapped up in my own head to notice how little sense his response made. It wasn't until the next shift that I really started paying attention. Jerry and the boys are meeting us at the pub later. You joining us, Harry? Lachlan asked. I blinked. My first instinct was to say no, that I wasn't in the mood. Then I realized there was nothing stopping me anymore, no one waiting at home, and a drink with the boys sounded better than going back to my empty apartment, where everything reminded me of her. Yeah, sure, I said. Ah, bummer. The missus still have a problem with all those skimpies, does she? You should really tell her they've got nothing on her, and her banging body, Lachlan chuckled. Don't talk about her like that, I snapped. Then I frowned, the words catching up to me. I said I'll come. We broke up. Didn't Greg tell you? Still don't get what she's doing with a guy like you. You're what, a 4? Nah, like a 3.5. Lily is a solid 10. I stared at him, annoyed as hell, but more confused than anything. Why wasn't he listening? We broke up, I said slowly. Honestly, I get why you don't hang out with the lads anymore. If I had a woman like that waiting for me in my bed, you boys would never see me again, Lachlan laughed. I just looked at him, wondering if he was deliberately fucking with me, and briefly imagining my fist connecting with his acne-scarred face. Just shut the hell up, I said. Tell her I said hi when you see her later, he smirked. Tell her I could show her what a real man is like. I was seconds away from punching him when Greg called us over. That night, I joined the lads at the bar. I still caught myself averting my eyes from the skimpy, even though I had no reason to anymore. It felt wrong, like muscle memory I couldn't shake. And irritatingly, Lachlan was right. No one compared to Lily. The boys looked genuinely shocked when they saw me. What are you doing here, man? Isn't it you and your girl's anniversary today? Greg asked. It was. 1 year exactly, but we weren't together anymore, and I was past exhausted with this. Guys, we broke up. Are you messing with me or something? It isn't funny. It's kind of fucked up, actually. You just left her at the house? That's low, bro. Who would leave a girl like that at home? We broke up! It was pointless. They were purposely ignoring me, and I couldn't understand why. For the next half hour, they kept shooting me weird, dirty looks, judgmental ones. Lachlan just smirked, like this meant it was finally his chance with Lily. But Lily wasn't here. Why did they think that she was still around? What the hell was wrong with them? Your pal Al? The waitress said, setting a beer in front of me. I ordered a Guinness. I frowned. Normally I'd just accept it. I hated making a fuss, but between the boys and the constant misunderstanding, something in me snapped. I ordered a Guinness. Yes, this is your pal Al, she said slowly, like I was stupid. I know, but I ordered a Guinness. Sir, this is a pal Al, she said again, irritation creeping into her voice. I know. I was seething. Why did she look annoyed? I ordered a Guinness. I already told you this is your pal Al, she snapped, crossing her arms before storming off. I stared after her, completely disoriented. What the hell is her problem? I asked. No one answered. I turned back to the boys, searching their faces for anything that backed me up, but they were all glaring at me. What's the matter with you? Greg demanded. Have you gone mad? My chest tightened. Was I going mad? Or had everyone else? I'm sorry, I said instead. I've been a mess since Lily left me, all right? You didn't even buy her roses? Greg's eyebrows shot up. On your anniversary? Go back home to your girl right now, man. Go make things right. What the hell? I stood up, my head pounding, and I left the bar. My thoughts were spiraling. What is going on? At home, I called my mom. I needed to be grounded. I needed something familiar. Her voice had always been able to pull me back when everything else felt wrong. Hey, Mom, I really need someone to talk to, I said. I'm good, honey. What about yourself? She replied. The answer immediately put me on edge. It didn't match what I had just said at all. Still, I told myself she hadn't heard me properly. Mom's hearing wasn't always the best. Not great, honestly. Lily and I broke up a few days ago. My throat tightened as I said it. Tears stung my eyes, the first time I felt close to crying since she left. Talking to my mom always did that, like I could finally let my guard down. Did she like the flowers? What flowers did you get her? I hope you cooked her a good dinner too. You've got a good one there, Harry, Mom said cheerfully. My body went cold. No, there was no way she was ignoring me too. My mom wouldn't do that. She'd never be that cruel. I tried again, slower this time. Mom, we broke up. Lily and I broke up. That's wonderful. I'm so happy you found such a beautiful relationship. You better put a ring on it soon, she laughed. I hurled my phone across the room. My chest rose and fell as I paced. Why didn't anyone understand what I was saying? Lily's voice echoed in my head. Good luck finding anyone else who understands you like I do. My thoughts raced. It was ridiculous, impossible, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this was somehow her doing. Had she told the boys to mess with me? To make me feel crazy as some kind of punishment? I was sure most of them would do anything if she smiled at them. But my mom too? That didn't make any sense. Needing answers, I rushed back to my phone, relieved to see it hadn't cracked. The call was still connected. Harry, are you still there? Yeah, I've got to go, Mom. Love you, I said. Yes, I am looking forward to lunch next week, she replied pleasantly. Even that didn't line up with what I said. I ended the call with a shaky breath and dialed Lily's number, only hesitating for a moment. She picked up on the first ring, just like she always used to. Lily had been within reach, always there when I needed her. Harry? Her voice was soft, sad. My chest tightened instantly. I'd missed her voice more than I wanted to admit. I forced myself to stay focused. Did you tell everyone to mess with me? Mess with you? She repeated. Relief flooded through me so sharply it almost made me dizzy. For the first time in days, someone had responded in a way that actually made sense. She wasn't ignoring me. She wasn't twisting my words. She was listening. She was understanding me. Harry, what are you talking about? I hesitated suddenly, aware of how insane I sounded. Still, I couldn't let it go. It's just... Everyone is ignoring me. They're not listening to a thing I'm saying. They're making me feel crazy. And I remember the last thing you said to me was, good luck finding anyone who understands me like I do. She went quiet. The silence stretched unbearably. My heart hammered in my chest. I said that because I was hurt, she said finally, her voice low. Guilt stabbed straight through me. I'd never wanted to hurt her. That had never been my intention. What do you mean everyone is ignoring you? She asked. She sounded genuinely confused, concerned even. I dragged a hand down my face. It's like they're pranking me. I'll say one thing, and they'll respond with something that makes no sense. I can't get through to anyone. Saying it out loud only made it feel worse, unreal, like I was describing someone else's breakdown. I understand, she said. My head snapped up. You do? Yeah, since coming back to live with my parents, seeing my friends again, I don't know. It's like no one's on the same wavelength as me. I can't connect with anyone either, she said quietly. Not since you. My chest ached. That wasn't what I meant, was it? I miss you, the words tumbled from my mouth before I could stop them. They felt right to say. I did miss her. I miss you too, but you're right. This is for the best. When I moved out there, all I had was you. I guess I got pretty attached. It was hard to make friends. I was jealous you had so many people, and all I had was you. She sighed, and the sound twisted something deep in me. I remembered those moments clearly now. Her jealousy, her insecurity. I'd always brushed it off, but I'd lived in this town my whole life. She'd left everything behind for me. Family, friends, her entire support system. Of course she'd clung to me. Why had that ever felt like a problem? Why hadn't I just brought her along more instead of insisting on doing my own thing? The more I thought about it, the less sense our breakup made. The unease I'd felt around her dissolved, replaced by regret so sharp it made my chest hurt. I want you back, Lily. I'm so sorry for neglecting your feelings. I was a shit boyfriend, I said. I want you back too. Hope surged through me. But I think we need a little more space. It's nice being around friends and family again. I'm remembering who I was before you. Something inside me cracked. I didn't want her to remember who she was before me. I didn't want her to be okay without me. I wasn't okay without her. Give it another week, then I'll come visit and we'll see if we still have something, she suggested. The thought of another week without her made my chest ache, but I swallowed it down. Okay. That whole week, the only thing keeping me sane was knowing I'd see her again soon. The insanity never stopped. People continued misunderstanding every word I said. Everyone still acted like Lily and I were together, like nothing was wrong. I'd order a chicken parm at a restaurant and get spaghetti instead. And then finally, she came back. I picked her up from the train station, scooped her into my arms. She was just as stunning as ever, smelling amazing despite being in a stuffy train for 7 hours. Her laughter was like music in my ears. I'd never been more ecstatic in my life. We spent most of the evening in bed, and when we were physically exhausted, I rolled over to look at her and said, I'm never letting you out of my sight again. Finally, you know how I feel, she smiled, rolling her eyes. She moved back in. At work, I was in a better mood than I'd been in for 2 weeks. Greg noticed. Someone's happy. Yeah, I said, accepting that people were going to misinterpret everything I said these days. I didn't care anymore. I had my beautiful girl back. I got her back, I said with a happy sigh. Greg frowned. Who? Lily? His eyes widened. Did you two break up? Yeah, man. I paused. He understood what I said. He actually replied with something that made sense for once. I narrowed my eyes. So you were messing with me? Greg looked at me like I was an idiot. Messing with you? Man, what are you talking about? All those times I told you we'd broken up, you did hear what I said, didn't you? I accused. Man, He paused, furrowing his brows like he was confused now. Huh, that's weird. What? I scoffed. You did tell us, he said in a sudden shocked realization. You said it to Jerry 5 times in a row. We broke up. That was when I had decided to just mess with him back a few days ago. I'd stared at Jerry with a flat look and repeated it robotically, and he just chuckled and said, Yeah, I guess the weather is nice today, man. Weird. I swore you were going on about some other thing, Greg said. Wait, you said to me you shit your pants. I almost laughed. That was also when I was messing with them. I had looked Greg directly in the eyes and said, I shit myself, to see how far he'd take this weird prank, but he just clapped me on the shoulder and said, That's great news, man. I stared at Greg, a cold, uncomfortable feeling washing over me at the genuine confusion on his face. Dude, we thought you were losing your mind. Why did I think it was normal for you to say, let's go golfing? You hate golfing. You'd never suggest that. What the hell? He stepped back, looking like he wanted to vomit. I feel weird, man, he said. Are you okay? I asked, genuinely concerned. Yeah. He furrowed his brows and gave me a weird look. Let's, get back to work. It stuck with me all afternoon. They had all been genuinely hearing things I wasn't saying. The other guys started understanding me again, too. Even they seemed creeped out by something. It's like some voodoo shit, I heard Jerry mutter to Lachlan. Lachlan almost looked scared when he'd look at me now. I didn't let it spoil my mood. I was a little weirded out, sure, but I had my beautiful girl back. Everything felt right again. How was your day? Lily asked when I came home. I hugged her immediately and breathed her in. She was like a drug. Her scent, her warmth, my entire body relaxed. Good. But a lot better now. Over the week, the boys invited me out more than usual. They were persistent, but I refused every time. All I wanted was to be with Lily. I canceled plans with my mom. I wanted to spend every minute with her. I even started thinking about quitting my job for a remote one so I could stay home. Anything to be surrounded by her. Until one day, the boys cornered me at work. They all looked worried, even Lachlan. Something's happening to you, man, Jerry said, and it's because of Lily. What? I laughed, shaking my head. He stayed serious. What do you even know about her? The question hit me like a punch. What do you mean? I mean, what does she do? Does she work? Where does her family live? How did you meet? Greg asked. My mind went blank. I didn't have answers to any of it. But that wasn't the worst part. A strange part of me, something old and buried, screamed that something was wrong, like a threat hovering just out of sight. She doesn't work, I said. Does she? I wasn't sure. I make more than enough to support us both, I shrugged. Besides, she's easy to provide for. She catches the train to see her family, so obviously they must live in the city. You don't know where her parents live? Jerry demanded. Have you ever even met them? Of course I had. Had I? My stomach twisted. When did you pick her up from the train? Lackland suddenly asked. I frowned. Why would he ask that? On Saturday, I said. All their faces drained of color. Seriously, what is wrong with you guys? I asked. The train doesn't run on Saturdays, Harry, Greg said, looking sick again. So what are you saying? I folded my arms. She's been lying to you. She's doing something really weird to you. And us. We didn't understand what you were saying for a full week, Harry. Do you know how freaky that is? And now, when we think back on that week, it's like there was an evil presence with us, something controlling us. Something's wrong with that chick. Don't talk about her like that, I spat. How did you meet her, Harry? Greg repeated. I don't know, I snapped. They all looked at each other, like I'd just confirmed something for them. You need to get away from her. She's some sort of... Jerry trailed off, like he knew the word he was about to say sounded ridiculous even to him. Fuck this, I'm leaving early. I turned away from them. We've never even met her, Harry. I could have sworn we had, but we haven't. Has your mom even met her? I kept walking because I didn't want to admit the truth. I don't know. I was desperate to be back with her. At home, she opened her arms and I melted into them. The guys were saying some weird stuff today. I mumbled into her hair. Just ignore them, baby. They'll never understand what we have, she hummed. I took a few days off work. The boys blew up my phone, but I told them to leave me alone. One night, I was looking for my hoodie, my favorite hoodie. It was cold and I needed it. I wondered where it could be when I noticed, for the first time, the room. It was just a normal room at the end of the hallway, but I'd never seen it before in my life. I blinked. How could I not know there was a whole room in my own apartment? I went inside. It was small, a basic spare room with a bed, a desk, and a wardrobe. But in the middle of the floor, a triangle of candles was laid out, and in the center of it sat my hoodie. My favorite book, the one I'd been missing for months, and my toothbrush, also missing for weeks. I stared at them in shock, stepping closer. Don't touch anything. Come back to bed, baby, her voice said behind me. I turned, and even though unease crept in, I couldn't help but smile at the cute, sleepy face. What is all this? I asked slowly, in some sort of haze. She shrugged. My eyes flicked back to the bed, and a strange thought hit me, almost funny. Lily, when you left, I began, did you ever actually leave? She chuckled. Of course I didn't, Harry. I'd never leave you. You'll always be within my reach. I went back to bed, and now as she sleeps beside me, I'm typing this out on my phone. There's a part of me that knows something is wrong, that I'm under some kind of spell. I can feel the small voice in my head telling me to get out, but it's getting quieter. Maybe the boys are right. Maybe I know they are. But has she really done anything I don't want? She wants me forever. I want her forever. I suppose the only reason I'm writing this at all is because I'm afraid I'll forget I ever felt differently. Because I feel really forgetful these days. And maybe I just want to see what other people think. It's a beautiful girl who wants me all to herself every day for the rest of my life. Is that really so bad? It's what I want, isn't it? The most important rule at my job is to never create a physical record. I found what the last person in my position wrote, and I think I'm in danger. It started 6 months ago. I was fresh out of grad school with a master's in history, a mountain of debt that gave me nightly anxiety attacks, and a resume that was getting ignored by every museum and university in a 3-state radius. I was applying for everything: retail, data entry, barista. I was about 2 weeks from having to crawl back to my parents' spare room when I saw the ad. It was discreet. Posted on a high-end academic job board I'd forgotten I even had an account for. Archival associate, the foundation, discretion, precision, and an exceptional capacity for recall are paramount. No formal experience required. Generous compensation. Generous was an understatement. The salary they listed was more than my parents make combined. I figured it was a typo or a scam, but I was desperate, so I polished my CV and sent it in, not expecting to hear back. They called me the next day. The woman on the phone had a smooth voice, but with a weight to it. She didn't ask about my experience or my degree. She asked me a series of bizarre questions. When you were 10, What was the pattern on the wallpaper in your grandmother's kitchen? Describe the cover of the third book you see when you picture your childhood bookshelf. What was the name of the street sign you passed just before turning onto your current road this morning? Luckily for me, my brain is just sticky. Details cling to it, and I know for a fact that it's a photographic sensory thing. I can close my eyes and walk through my grandmother's house, feel the cool linoleum under my feet, smell the potpourri she kept in a bowl on the sideboard. I answered her questions, and she said, "Please be at this address tomorrow at 9 a.m. sharp. Dressed for an interview." The address was a downtown monolith, a skyscraper with no name on the facade, just an elaborate interlocking symbol above the heavy bronze doors that looked like a stylized knot. The lobby was a cavern of marble and silence. The air was cool and still, like a cathedral. A man in a simple, perfectly tailored gray suit met me and led me to an elevator, then up to a floor that had no button. He used a key. The interview was with a man I now know only as the supervisor. He was ageless, with pale eyes that seemed to look right through me. He explained the job. It was simple, he said. Deceptively so. Each day I would be given a single photograph. My task was to study that photograph from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. I was to absorb it, to commit every single detail to memory. The play of light, the grain of the image, the expressions on the faces, the stitching on a coat, the cracks in a sidewalk, the reflection in a window. "You will become the living record," he said, his voice a low hum. "You will not write anything down. You will not make any copies. You will not discuss your work with anyone. At 5 o'clock, I will collect the photograph, and you will watch me incinerate it. The Foundation's motto is Quadam Optime Mirandum. Some things are best remembered." It was the strangest job I'd ever heard of, but the debt was on my chest, and the number on the contract he slid across the mahogany desk could change my entire life. I signed. My workplace was in a vast circular room that felt like a panopticon. Dozens of identical wooden carrels were arranged in concentric rings, all facing a central pillar. Each carrel was a small three-sided booth with a comfortable chair, a desk, and a single lamp. There were maybe 30 other people in the room. The only sound was the soft rustle of clothing and the low, ever-present hum of the building's climate control. No one spoke. No one even looked at each other. They were all just like me, head down, focused with an intensity that was almost unnerving. They had the same look I saw in the mirror every morning, a mixture of intelligence and quiet desperation. The first photograph was of a dusty, empty ballroom. Ornate, peeling plasterwork on the ceiling. A single chandelier draped in cobwebs. Sunlight streamed through a grimy arched window, illuminating a universe of dancing dust motes. That was it. For 8 hours, I just looked. I memorized the way the shadows fell, the specific pattern of the water stains on the far wall, the number of crystal pendants missing from the chandelier, 17. At 5 p.m., the supervisor came, took the photo with a pair of tongs, and I followed him to a small, sun-proofed room containing a sleek, modern furnace. He unlocked it, slid the photo inside, and pressed a button. A soft whir, a flash of orange light, and it was gone. He nodded at me, and I went home. The days fell into a rhythm, a new photo every morning. A wedding party from the 1920s, the bride's smile just a little too tight, a grimy factory floor, men in flat caps staring grimly at a piece of machinery, a desolate stretch of highway at dusk, a single abandoned car with its door hanging open, crowded market in a city I couldn't place, faces blurred with motion except for one small child staring directly at the camera, their expression utterly blank. They were all unlabeled, no dates, no locations, no context, just moments, frozen and silent. My colleagues remained phantoms. We'd nod sometimes in the elevator or the sterile break room, where we'd microwave our sad, solitary lunches. But we never spoke. It was a rule, and a powerful one. It was as if we were all part of some silent monastic order. I saw a woman who couldn't have been older than me. But her eyes had the haunted, distant look of a war veteran. An older man always rubbed his left temple, a constant rhythmic motion as he stared at his photos. We were all islands. The dream started about a month in. At first they were just echoes. I dream I was standing in the dusty ballroom, and all I could smell was the decay and the dry rot. I'd hear the faint, ghostly echo of a waltz. I woke up feeling unsettled, but I dismissed it. My job was to stare at images all day. Of course they'd creep into my subconscious. But they got stronger. After a week spent memorizing a photo of a grim-faced family on a sagging porch in what looked like the Dust Bowl, I had a dream where I was the father. I could feel the rough, splintered wood of the porch railing under my hand, the grit of dust between my teeth, and gnawing, hopeless hunger in my stomach. I felt desperate, protective love for the woman and children beside me, a love so fierce and painful it made my chest ache when I woke up. The day I studied a photo of a collapsed mine entrance, I spent the night dreaming of darkness, the oppressive weight of the earth above me, the taste of coal dust, the chilling, subterranean cold that seeps into your bones. I heard the shouts of other men, muffled and terrified, in the groan of shifting rock. I woke up gasping for air, my pajamas soaked in sweat, my throat raw from screams that had been trapped in my sleeping mind. This became the new normal. Every night I was a tourist in someone else's tragedy. I was a soldier in a trench, the mud sucking at my boots, the smell of cordite and fear thick in the air. I was a lone woman in a lighthouse, the storm winds howling around me like a hungry beast, the waves crashing against the stone with the force of cannonballs. I was a witness to car accidents, fires, arguments steeped in a quiet, venomous rage. I was living 100 different lives, and none of them were my own. My own life began to feel thin and unreal. I'd be walking to the grocery store, and the texture of the modern pavement would feel strange, alien. The bright colors of the cereal aisle seemed garish and loud compared to the sepia and black and white worlds I inhabited every night. My own memories started to get fuzzy. I had to really concentrate to remember my college roommate's name, but I could tell you the exact pattern of the rust stains on the hull of a shipwreck I'd studied for 8 hours 3 weeks prior. The first major crack appeared on a Tuesday. I'd spent the day with a particularly haunting photograph. It was a street corner, sometime in the late 70s, judging by the cars and clothes. A crowd was gathered, looking at something just out of frame. Their faces were a mixture of shock and morbid curiosity, but my focus for 8 hours had been one man on the edge of the crowd. He was younger, maybe in his early 20s, with a thick mustache and a denim jacket. He wasn't looking at whatever the main event was. He was looking away, his face pale, his eyes wide with a specific personal terror. He was the only one who looked truly afraid. That evening, on the way home, I saw him. I was waiting to cross the street, and he was on the other side. Older, of course. His mustache was gray, his face was lined with the intervening 40-odd years, but it was him. The same wide-set eyes, the same shape of the jaw. The denim jacket was gone, replaced by a rumpled tweed coat, but it was unmistakably the man from the photograph. I froze. My heart slammed against my ribs. It had to be a coincidence. A trick of the light, my overstimulated brain making connections that weren't there. But then he turned his head, and his eyes met mine across the 4 lanes of traffic. Recognition dawned on his face, and then horror. The exact same expression from the photograph, a raw, gut-wrenching terror that seemed to suck all the air out of the space between us. He looked at me as if I were a ghost, as if I were the very thing he'd been running from on that street corner all those years ago. He stumbled backward, turned, and practically ran, disappearing into the evening crowd. I stood there for a long time, the traffic lights cycling from red to green to red again, the world moving on around me while my own had just ground to a sickening halt. That was when the paranoia began in earnest. The silence of the archive, once peaceful, now felt predatory. The hyper-focus of my colleagues no longer seemed like professional dedication. It looked like a desperate attempt to keep something at bay. I started watching them more closely. The man who rubbed his temple, his hand would sometimes twitch, his fingers spraying as if trying to ward something off. The young woman's haunted eyes would occasionally flick towards an empty space in her corral, her breath catching for a second before she forced her gaze back to the photo. I had to know what was going on. I broke the cardinal rule. I waited for the temple rubbing man in the break room. He was nuking a container of what looked like plain rice. I walked up to him, my heart thudding. "Excuse me," I said, my voice sounding rusty and loud in the quiet room. He flinched. He didn't just turn, he physically recoiled, his back hitting the counter. He looked at me with wide, panicked eyes, shaking his head frantically. He grabbed his face, the microwave beeping insistently, and almost ran from the room, never once making eye contact. He didn't say a single word. The message was clear. We don't talk. We can't talk. Maybe we're not allowed to talk. Or maybe we're just too afraid of what might happen if we do. Then people started to disappear. One Monday, the corral to my left was empty. The man who sat there, a quiet fellow with thinning hair, was just gone. No one mentioned it. His desk was cleared out as if he'd never existed. 2 weeks later, the woman with the haunted eyes was gone too. Her corral also wiped clean. There was no internal memo, no farewell card, just a silent, growing void in our ranks. Were they fired? Did they quit? Or was it something else? I was spiraling. My apartment no longer felt like my own. I'd catch a flicker of movement in my peripheral vision and turn to see a shadow that looked like a soldier in a trench coat. The scent of ozone and rain would fill my living room on a clear night, a phantom echo from a photo of a lightning-struck tree. The breakthrough, if you can call it that, came last week. I sat down at my desk and my hand brushed against something taped to the underside. It was a small, folded piece of paper. My blood ran cold. It felt deliberate, clandestine. I waited until my hand stopped shaking and slipped it into my pocket. I spent the day in a fugue state, staring at a photo of a single withered black rose lying on a cobblestone street my mind entirely on the note in my pocket. That night, in the privacy of my own apartment, I unfolded it. It wasn't a note, not in the traditional sense. It was just a string of alphanumeric characters, A7B3-C961-E4F8. I had no idea what it meant. A code? A web address? Then I remembered. Every archivist had a small personal safe in the locker room for valuables. We set our own combinations. But this didn't look like a combination. It looked like a serial number, or a key. The next day I watched The Woman with the Haunted Eyes chorale. It was still empty. I took a chance. After everyone had left, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears, I went to the locker room. I found her locker. Next to the combination dial was a small, almost invisible keyhole. It was an override. This had to be it. I looked for a key, but then it clicked. The sequence was a password for the digital lock on her safe. I typed in the sequence, there was a soft beep, and a heavy click. The safe was full with paper, scraps, notebooks, loose-leaf sheets filled with a frantic, spidery handwriting. It was forbidden knowledge, the one thing we were never, ever supposed to do. She had been writing it all down. I took it all, stuffed it in my bag, and ran. I've spent the last 3 days poring over her notes. It's not a single coherent narrative. It's the fragmented, desperate research of a brilliant, terrified mind. There are clippings from obscure historical journals, printouts from physical forums, and pages of her own synthesis. And I finally understand. According to her notes, certain moments in time, certain places, are so saturated with trauma or violence or some powerful, paradoxical emotion that they create a kind of scar on reality. A resonance. She used a lot of terms I barely understood. Quantum entanglement, temporal feedback loops, mnemonic resonance, but the term she kept circling, the one she'd scrawled over and over in the margins, was genius loci, spirit of place. But she'd added her own qualifier, genius loci malignum. These aren't just memories of bad events, they are the events themselves still echoing. They are moments that have become sentient and predatory. A murder that was so brutal it imprinted itself on the room, and now the room itself lashes out at anyone who enters. A paradox. Like a man who appears in a photograph of his own grandfather's unit years before he was born, creating a loop that attracts things. Unwanted attention from outside. These are glitches in the fabric of the universe, hauntings of a moment, of a place, of an idea. The Foundation's job is to find these glitches. They capture them. And the way they capture a rogue moment, a sentient memory, is to take a photograph. The photograph acts as a physical anchor, a key, but it's unstable. The note explains the process. Step 1. The photograph isolates the entity. It traps the genuous loci in a single static image. Step 2. The archivist, through intense, prolonged focus, transfers the anchor from the photograph into their own consciousness. Our photographic memories, our ability to absorb every single detail, is a prerequisite for the cage to work. We memorize the images so completely that our mind becomes the new vessel. Step 3. The photograph is incinerated. This destroys the original physical anchor, leaving the entity trapped entirely within the mind of the archivist. It has nowhere else to go. We are prisons. Human prisons for things that should not exist. The motto, "Some things are best remembered," is a cruel, literal joke. They are remembered by us, and only us, so that the rest of the world can forget, so that these malevolent echoes can't bleed out and harm anyone else. The few suffer for the many. The woman's journal entries chronicled her decline. October 12th, archived the boardwalk collapse. I could still hear the screams when it's quiet. Sometimes I smell the salt water and the fried dough. November 4th, saw the arsonist from the warehouse fire photo on the subway today. He looked right at me and smiled. It wasn't a human smile. December 19th, my sister came to visit. For a second, her face wasn't her face. It was the face of the porcelain doll from the abandoned nursery photo. I screamed. She thinks I'm having a breakdown. January 8th, I've archived 112 anomalies. There isn't much room left for me in here. I can't remember what I had for breakfast. Now I know the exact number of buttons on the coat of a man who vanished from a ship in 1924. Her last entry was short. They're getting out, they're leaking, the cage is full. I've archived almost 200 of them now. 200 of these things. And the cage is full. My cage is full. My reality is fraying out at the seams. Last night I was making tea, and for a full minute my kitchen wasn't my kitchen. It was a cold, tiled morgue from a photo I'd studied months ago. The man from the 70th Street corner. I see him everywhere now. In crowds, his face always twisted in the same silent scream, always looking right at me. The walls of my apartment sometimes ripple and show me the peeling wallpaper of a Victorian seance home. The static on the radio whispers words in a language I don't know but understand with a cold dread. I think now that I am a walking, talking containment unit that has breached, and the entities I hold are starting to leak into the world around me. The other day, my landlord knocked on my door to ask about a water leak, and he flinched when he saw me. He said, "Sorry, for a second there you looked like someone else. A lot of someone else's." He left without another word, his face pale. I found myself in the bathroom 2 nights ago, holding a bottle of pills. It felt like the most logical, rational thought I'd had in months. If I end it, they end with me. The memories, the things wearing the skins of my memories, they all get erased. It would be a release, for me and for the world. But as I was about to do it, the supervisor's voice echoed in my head. "You will become the living record." And I realized with a sudden, freezing certainty that this is what they want. This is the end of the job cycle. It's the Foundation's retirement plan. They hire us, they fill us up with these horrors until we break, and then we retire ourselves. It's clean, efficient, and it completes the final incineration. So now I'm trapped. I can't go on like this. I'm losing myself. My own memories feel like old, faded photographs compared to the vivid, high-definition nightmares I'm forced to carry. But I can't kill myself because that's playing their game. That's letting them win. That's doing their dirty work for them. Is there another way? Can you fight a memory? Can you exercise an event? I'm sitting in my apartment right now. The lights are flickering. In the reflection of the dark screen, my face is a flickering montage of 100 others. A soldier, a bride, a factory worker, a terrified man on a street corner. The hum of the building sounds like a waltz, then like the roar of a fire, then like the howl of a storm at sea. They are all in here, and they want to get out. What do I do?